Leaders Conclave, the 5th session, but the first session for the day. Turning setbacks into comebacks, role of private sector. And to moderate this session, I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Ruwan Ederisinghi, President, FCCISL. I'd also like to invite the panelists, Ms. Shobana Kamineni, President, CII India, Mr. Zubair Ahmed Malik, former President, FBCCI, Dasso Phubshiring, Secretary General, BCCI, and Mr. Shekhar Golcha, Senior Vice President, FNCCI, Nepal. We all know that the governments, through international agreements and national policies and policy changes, may be working the framework for increased regional integration, but integration will only happen when the business operators start to operate for the entire market and do not confine themselves in basing their operations on the resources available in their national markets. I think the national chambers and the federations, as organizers of businesses from a country, have a large role to play in the process of integration. And in this session, the moderator will be moderating the panelists and discussing on the role of the private sectors in turning setbacks into comebacks. So I would now like to request our moderator, Mr. Ruwan, to kindly take over with the session. I'd like to request the technical team to also have some cordless mic ready. And I'd like to request our hotel staff to kindly have a few bottles of water up here on the stage. Thank you.
Up to the third day session of our 6th SAARC Business Leaders Conclave. Today the first session. Of course, we are starting about 30 minutes late. Thank you very much for participating for this first forum in the morning. Now, today our subject matter is turning setbacks into comebacks, role of private sector. As all of us know, SAARC was organized by our South Asian countries' political leaders, and it was understood after the organizing of SAARC that the role of countries' economic development is totally depending on the private sector. That is why SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry was inaugurated. So in context of regional development, trade improvements, the part of the private sector is taking the leadership. So today discussion basically on the inputs of private sector through the chambers, through the federations of each country, how we can bring in development to our countries, how we can bring in trade into our countries will be discussed. Today our eminent panel includes Ms. Shobana Kamineni, President, Chamber of Confederation of Indian Industries, CII India, and Mr. Zubair Malik, ex-chairman, Pakistan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Mr. Phubshiring, Secretary General, Bhutan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and Mr. Shekhar Golcha, Senior Vice President, Federation of Nepal Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I like to open the discussion from Ms. Shobana, giving you just to give a brief introduction, because I know Ms. Shobana is coming from a well-reputed business organization in our region, which is giving a lot of service to our region. So I like if you can please introduce a little bit about your background and then give your inputs on the subject matter.
Thank you, Mr. Ederisinghi, distinguished panelists and the members of the chamber, the SAARC chamber, ladies and gentlemen. very pleased to be here in Kathmandu for this summit. It assumes actually importance at this particular juncture of history. And I'll be a little candid and frank. I think that the room is small, and I assume that whatever we discuss, we have so many shared interests and issues that we have to be very frank at times and discuss, and it's only industry that has the privilege of keeping diplomacy to one side, because one is that many of us in this room have multi-geographical businesses, and we do believe that is the way, that's the footprint which is desirable for the country. So first, you know, my background is in healthcare. My family started healthcare business, a hospital in India which was on international standards, Apollo Hospital. Today we have 73 of them, and we have health insurance, pharmacies, diagnostics, integrated services for healthcare, including almost 7,000 telemedicine centers internationally up to Africa and many countries. But the point is that today I sit here in the role of the President of the Confederation of Indian Industry. And the Confederation is a very interesting body because we represent 60% of India's GDP. Our membership are the large companies, the very large companies of India, but they also are, the majority of them are MSMEs. We have 8,000 members, but we helm all the associations of India. So you have, whether it's the automotive or the steel or even flour milling to agri, all these associations are held by the Confederation of Indian Industry, which gives us access to something like 90,000 indirect members. So we're a fairly large body. And this large body works very closely with the government. It's a one-year term as president. I've had the privilege of actually working from the WTO ministerial that went to Buenos Aires to, so whether it's FTAs, whether it's diplomatic missions that we go to, and led by business teams from Sweden to Russia to Canada, to many countries. I think that I can't really name what we've done, but what we found is that countries like ours really have a very important space in today's world. And this is something that I want to share with you, because it's not just India. We have a shared legacy. One is that we're very similar in the way that we are, that and our cultures all started from the same. And a very important point is that India might be a $2.4 trillion economy today, but please understand, our per capita is pretty much, we all have the same per capita, which is basically we have the same challenges in giving jobs to millions and millions. And I think this is the most fundamental job that industry and government must understand. And once we're aligned on that, to see that we can be job creators, because one is that we understand a disparity, a huge Gini coefficient of incomes is not prosperity. We have to make it inclusive. So these are the important fundamentals that I know that we all share. In health, again, we share the same challenges. Our per capita in India is about $100 per person, whereas the OECD spends close to $5,000 per capita with this. And I know what it is in Pakistan, in Bangladesh. We're all around the same. And the thing is that we cannot afford just, to extrapolate health to every other sector. But just imagine if your health bill goes from $100 per capita to $200 or $300, or God forbid $1,000. This will wipe out your GDP. This will completely deteriorate the economic health of a country, which is why it's up to us in every sector that the innovation will come from frugal innovation. If you look at your banking system and some of the things that India is doing today, in terms of large accounts that we've opened, and we've just moved digitally. All of us, we know that we're the most, leave you with the last point because I don't want to go on, but one is that we have the challenges of jobs, but please understand, we also have the challenges of youth. Among all of us, we will be the youngest set of country in the world. The rest of the world's population has stopped growing. Our region, the SAARC region, will continue to grow for another 20 years. And at that point, when the world will stabilize around 8 billion people. And as our youth grow, today 60% of Indians are under the age of 35. I would imagine your demographies are about the same. So just imagine, you will have 30 to 40% of the world's youth will be from this region. And I think that is significant. This is an extra challenge for the world. So it's up to us to make sure that we have healthy people, but more than anything else, we have people who are qualified to assume jobs for your own countries, jobs for the region, jobs for the world. And this is what I want to leave you with, that why it's imperative for industry to participate in forums like this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sobana. Next, I would like Mr. Subhay Malik just to give you your ideas on our subject matter today, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rohan. A very good morning to the audience. Being present here on Sunday, a holiday. The very presence of 5 panelists from 5 different countries signifies the role of the private sector. The holding of this SBLC amply tells us that we are converting the setbacks into comebacks. When the governments are not talking, we, the private sector, in this 6th SBLC, present here, we are talking. And we are moving forward. We are moving forward despite many challenges. And I was just having a discussion with my honorable colleague from India, the president of CII, that we had a lot of medical exchanges between Apollo Hospital, which he heads, and the movement of medical patients from Pakistan to India. They were given visas within a day or maximum 2 days to go for treatment over to India. But then that stopped. What next? Well, I came to know that the private sector from Pakistan, they moved over to, had some sort of agreements with their Indian counterpart doctors, and now they come to Pakistan for 2 or 3 days in a month and carry out the treatment over there. So the private sector knows how to find its way, and we have done this on many occasions. That does not mean that the role of government is insignificant. It is, because they are the people who lay down the rules and regulations, and we are the people who carry it forward. But we have always undermined the power of the private sector, because it is with our taxes, it is with our money, the governments run. When we contribute in that way, let me tell you that the governments, if we use our influence, we can force the governments to come and sit on tables. We have been performing on the economic sector as well as on the track 2 sectors, bringing them closer together. Differences do happen in governments, and that's the beauty of it, to resolve it through dialogues. Connectivity is another very important factor which is hampering the progress of this region. Please keep in mind that this region is bestowed with all the natural wealth, the mineral, the water resources, agriculture. This region was the region where the foreign warlords used to come and rule over it. Why? Because of the wealth we carried. This was the region which was called the food basket of the world. What happened to this region today, where only about 5% of the intra-regional trade is taking place, as compared to 25% in the ASEAN countries, 60% in the European Union. And nearly 40% of our people are living below the poverty line. It is the duty of the private sector, because we are the people who create jobs. It is we people who provide opportunities, open the doors to prosperity. But are we using our clout? Are we influencing our government in a way that there are less hindrances in the flow of goods from India to Pakistan and from Pakistan to Afghanistan and from Afghanistan onwards to the Central Asian countries? At least I can speak for the private sector of Pakistan. Yes, we are very vocal and we are putting our foot down where we have to. And my friends from Afghanistan will bear witness to this, that we told our government very clearly that this closing of borders every second month is not acceptable to us. So, this is what I expect from the private sector of the other countries as well, that we have to exert pressures on the government to reduce tensions at the borders and to provide congenial atmosphere for the people to interact, for the people to move. That is, facilitate them with providing them. Why do I have to wait for 2 months to get a visa to travel to India, and vice versa? Why do we have to need a visa at all? Why can't we follow the model of the European Union? Again, the unfortunate thing is, in this part of the world, we take 1 step forward and then we move 2 steps backward. Why this is happening to us? Because we take the dictates of the government, we accept them as fait accompli. We don't voice our concern over the issues. Until and unless we learn to call what is right, right, and what is wrong, we should tell the government, no, this is not acceptable to us. After all, it's we who are financing the running of the governments. It's we who are footing the salaries bill. Private sector, see, there are a lot of, we have signed this SAFTA, but are we utilizing SAFTA in its true potential? No, we are not. The discretionary powers given to the officials has virtually made this ineffective, because for them, the revenue is the main concern. The protectionist policies, and then here comes the role of the private sector again. We, the people in the SAARC-CCI, had a study carried out on the tariff and non-tariff barriers, which were hindering the flow of trades. See where the potential of Sri Lanka lies, and if I put it that in a restrictive list, that is no good, no advantage to the countries of this region. Another very important factor is that process have to be made simpler. Red tapeism and bureaucratic approach by the governments has to be reduced if the trade within this region has to move forward. Lot of is expected of the private sector, which we are doing. Lot more has to be done. And such meetings and conclaves, they help reduce the bureaucratic hurdles, and they give impetus to more understanding. There are formal sessions and there are informal sessions. And that's where we learn about the problems of each other. And we try to convert disadvantages into advantages. We find the ways and the means. We have had an opportunity in the past, and these 3 days have been very interactive. I had just had about 5 minutes conversation with the chief executive of Apollo, and we were just talking about, and we were trying to find out the solutions to the problem. We are the job providers. We are the backbone of the economy. We are the solution providers as well. What else do we expect from the private sector? The private sector has converted many of the drawbacks into comebacks, and we will continue to do so. I will not like to make this into some sort of a formal speech session, but I would request that let's have a discussion with the interaction from the audience as well, input coming in from that. And then we can come up with a set of recommendations to be put up to the respective comments of the SAARC countries. Let's pray for this region. With these few words, I would like to thank you once again for affording me this opportunity, and I'm here for any question and answer which later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subair Malik, for your excellent ideas. We will discuss further down with the facts that you taken up in the next session. Next, I will request Mr. Poop Sherik, the Secretary General of Bhutan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to give your inputs for the subject matter, please.
Good morning, distinguished delegates and the distinguished panelists. If we are talking about setbacks, I think within this region, I think we need to put it together. What are the issues that is hampering the growth of the economy, the trade transactions that is being done. If you look at the figures, we only have 5% of the global trade happening in this region. Whereas if you look at the population, I think we are more than 1.2 billion. So this shows that there is something wrong with it. And I think over the years, through this SLBC and interaction between the SAARC business leaders, we have come up with a lot of issues. Among them, connectivity was one issue, integration was one issue, infrastructure was the other issue, and so on and so forth. At the national level, I think, for Bhutan, we have also identified our own difficulties. And within the region, I think we have also identified common difficulties. Now, if we have to change back and use the setbacks to make a comeback. I think there is a need for change agents. And I'm sure the business leaders and the business apex bodies, such as the federations, the common SCCI, I think we can be change agents to get these things done. We face a lot of difficulties in getting access to finance. We also face difficulties in movement of resources. And that's because there are a lot of unharmonized rules and regulations, non-tariff barriers that are put into place because of the existing system in the countries within this region. Now, who resolves this? I think it's not the governments who will understand those difficulties, it is the private sector. We will have to come up with solutions. And as an individual federation in each country, if we can convince our government about these solutions and the need for integration within the region, then the SCCI as a voice can make differences within the policy regime of the region. Then only I think we can also think about our integration globally. And to do this, I think we need to first have bilateral discussions. And in forums such as this, I think we have to come up with regional issues that could be solved collectively. Today, as Mr. Malik has correctly put, we have a lot of difficulties in free movement of persons. We have problems in movement of goods because our custom rules are not harmonized at the moment. We don't have infrastructure such as integrated border points, entry and exit points that are in place. So these are some of the difficulties which I think we as the members of the SCCI can discuss and talk and also find solutions. Then only at a regional level, I think, we will be able to convince our policy makers that there is a need for a change. And we could be those change agents. This region has been doing businesses ever since time immemorial, but if you look at the connectivity issue, 2/3 of our people are not connected together. Now this calls for investment from the private sector. And investment can only happen if we provide, if the policymakers provide conducive environment and a good return for the investment. So what we can now think about is arming ourselves with information based on the difficulties faced by the business people in the region and coming up with solutions so that we can put it up to the policymakers. And when the policy changes, I think there can be a full integration. And then we can say that we have truly become a change agent to take the private sector forward, which in turn will uplift the livelihood of 1.3 billion people in this region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boo. We have another only about 20 plus minutes. I just request Mr. Shekhar Gocha, please give your inputs on the subject matter as brief as possible, please.
Okay. Fellow distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to wish a very, very good morning to all of you. Just a brief introduction of FNCCI. we are the apex body of the private sector in Nepal, with 105 representations in various districts and cities of Nepal. We have almost 99 of associations associated with us and 1,000 corporate members. So basically we're covering the entire private sector in Nepal. Because I was told that I should introduce my business as well, so just a little brief. I am one of the directors of Golcha organization, which is one of the oldest and probably one of the largest organizations of Nepal. It employs 17,000 people all around the country. Now, coming to the matter of the role of private sector, I would like to start a little internally as well, that how in Nepal's context, that of 2 decades of conflict and political instability, insurgency, how did the private sector help cope with the situation? Then I will like to go with the regional issues. So, everybody knows we went through armed conflict, and during the conflict, the economy still grew in an average of 2.5%. And this was unprecedented because, imagine a situation where almost 150 days out of in a year was closed because of political strikes or some political problems. And despite all this, we grew as a nation. Our economy did not collapse. The revenue continued to increase. And the only reason for this was the steadfast belief of the private sector that this conflict is going to be over, this transition is going to be over, and we're going to embark into a new era of economic stability and economic growth. And this is the reason. And I think this is an example we can show to the world that if a private sector really believes, it can really make a big difference. Now, coming to the region, that how private sector can help. I have to be very candid on this. Let's look at the facts, and which a lot of facts which is given by my fellow panelists as well. We are 25% of the population. We are one of the youngest region in the world. There is no doubt about this. Our mean age is, I think, probably around 28 of this region, which makes us the youngest region in the world. Our economies individually is one of the highest growing in the world, with an average of almost, like Nepal grew almost 6% in last 2-3 years. Pakistan has been a high growth economy. India is, of course, 7% plus economy. Bhutan is a high growth economy. Bangladesh is a high growth economy. And, entirely the region is growing very, very fast individually. But at the same time, we also have, my fellow panelists also mentioned about the abundant resources this region has. These are all positive things, but let's look at the ground reality. The ground reality is, among us, it's only 5% of the trade we do. And we are one of the poorest region in the world. Our infrastructure is one of the worst in the world. Some of the countries could be improving a lot now, but still, compared to the global standards, we are far below. Our Human Development Index is one of the poorest in the world. So, what is the reason? We individually could be doing well. So I feel there's one key word to all this. The key word is we as South Asians, we are into self-preserving politics. So whatever we do, we want to self-preserve ourselves. And the whole politics, till the time it becomes self-preserving, we cannot think of the region. We could be having such programs again and again, but the problem is, now I'll give you a few example of what I'm trying to say. And just recently, and I was just talking to one of the Pakistani gentlemen on this, that Pakistan recently has subsidized the sugar prices and also the wheat prices. Now what it has done is it has instantly, some countries have put anti-dumping duty. Nepal, we don't have an anti-dumping duty, and suddenly we find most of the mills closing down and then running into billions of losses. And so all the farmers are into big trouble right now. And the same with wheat. You know, Pakistan has been subsidizing wheat, even though, you know, we are signatories to WTO, but, you know, subsidies are happening. Look at India, for example. For a farmer in India, now today, practically everything is subsidized. The power, the energy is subsidized, the seed is subsidized, the fertilizer is subsidized. Even the minimum guaranteed price is guaranteed by the government. And also, you know, there are other guarantees and subsidies, the insurances as well. Now, how does a farmer in Nepal compete? How do we compete to India? Because we, as a nation, we do not have the resources to give such subsidies. So, till the time we are self-preserving, it is not possible to really look at regional cooperation. You know, we could look at our individual, you know, growth and things like this. And look at SAFTA, for example. We've had like SAFTA for a while. We have you know, a duty structure which is subsidized for this region, and you know, it's duty-free trade for a lot of items. There is of course a negative list, but we have the non-tariff barriers. Every country has a non-tariff barrier, and till the time, if they do not want it, they will activate the non-tariff barrier and restrict the trade. Till the time we do not have this mentality that, you know, this region is ours, and till the time we leverage each other's strength, it is not possible for any of these treaties or any of these trade treaties to really flourish. And of course, political problems. I mean, let us, you know, I do feel private sector has a great role in you know, in convincing the government that, you know, you could be doing your politics, but trade has to go on. You know, the businesses among this region can go on, but sometimes I would think that, you know, if bullets are firing from both sides or two sides, it's probably difficult to do trade. I mean, it is as you know, my fellow panelist also said that, you know, you take a step, one step forward and you take two steps backwards, you know. So I would like to conclude by saying that, you know, it is the self-preserving mentality that South Asians have. Till the time we do not think as a region and say that we want to leverage each other's strength to see more prosperity in this region. You know, for our own people, everybody is looking for growth, and there is a potential. Till the time we do not do this and change our mindset, it's not going to take us anywhere. With this, I would like to conclude my submission. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shekhar. It appears when we listen to all our panelists, we are talking about difficulties, how we can bring in regional integration, improve, how we can improve our intra-trade, how we can develop our countries. We are talking about all our weaknesses, but what is the way forward? Now, we are representing the private sector, we are representing the chambers and the federations. We are always blaming our bilateral agreements, other trade agreements that we have within us and also beyond us. Why we can't make use of them? Main thing what we are finding is sometimes the bureaucracy, sometimes the political inability of making things easier. We don't have seamless borders. We have transportation problems. We have accreditation problems. What is the way forward? How can we bring SAARC brand to the world? Can't we have a vision for 2030 to have a SAARC brand recognized in the world at the top level? How we can use our capacities? We are talking about our internal capacities within the SAARC countries. We are talking about our 45% young generation. We are talking about our untapped natural resources. We are talking about our location, geographical location in the world. We are talking about the next decades, the world economic leaders coming from Asia. How we can get the opportunity of these developments in the future. So I like to give another round for the panelists, maximum to 2 minutes please, to give your inputs. What is the way forward? We'll start from, we'll start from Mr. Shekhar, please.
The way forward, I think it's a no-brainer, honestly, that we need to collaborate more. As I mentioned, that the potential of our region is immense, and we need to see that how and I can say this in Nepal's context, and this is what we've been telling the government, that the economic agendas has to be the foremost, the most important agenda a political party or political system should carry. Unfortunately, in our region, as I did mention, that it is not the top priority. Politics somehow dominates all our thought processes. And if we really make economic agendas as our main sort of agenda and our thought process and our guiding principle for all our bilateral trades and for our relationships, I think a lot of problems can be solved. Because it's our political egos and political problems which is never ending, and there is no light in the end of the tunnel. I mean, we are fighting for 50 years. The two nations fighting for 50 years, and the whole region is suffering. So we really need to come out of all this and really see that how economic agendas can be prioritized so that the entire region can benefit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shekhar. Next, I'd like Mr. Poop to give your inputs.
Thank you for the question. Moving ahead, I think, what can we see? If the region has to improve, I think we have to honor the conventions that we are signatory to it. We have left those behind, putting more emphasis on the bilateral agreements that are in existence. I think we have to slowly move out from those and be part of the regional conventions so that everyone is at an equal footing. And among those, the transit trade issues and non-tariff barriers, I think those are very important things. This needs to be resolved. If we can do that, I think we can be more integrated. If we are more integrated, I think we have ample of resources which everybody can capitalize on it, depending on the technological advancement, the human capital that is available. But then I think, moving ahead, the third thing that we need to do is, as good as we in the private sector talk with each other, we will have to impress upon our policymakers to do the same thing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fook. I like Mr. Subair Malik as a very long-standing chamber activist. What is the way forward for our each country federations and business chambers? How we can bring in SAARC as a vibrant entity in the world by 2030? If you can please give your ideas.
Thank you, Roman. Actually, first of all, we should know what SAARC is suffering from. We are suffering from unfounded apprehensions, fears, and these are what creating major bottlenecks. We have to learn and trust and start believing in each other. That is the first and the foremost thing. Having said that, I think we should have clarity, the private sector should have clarity of vision and goal, what we have to go for and how we should achieve it. The first thing I would say is free movement of people, goods and services within the region. This is one thing we have to pursue. Second is connectivity, air, rail and sea. The third is mutual acceptance of certifications of member bodies within the SAARC countries. The fourth is what we have already signed, that is the SAARC energy grid, operationalization of that energy grid. Fifth, the motor vehicle agreement which was signed by 4 countries, and now which you are operating as BBIN. The rest countries who have not signed it, in the coming summit, we should make sure, and then that too is connected to connectivity as well, that all the rest of the countries. And let me tell you the power of the private sector in this very city where the last summit took place. There was a deadlock on the energy sector, signing of this. And we were told, the delegation from Pakistan, that it is Pakistan which is hindering this. We intervened. We had a word with our Prime Minister and with our Foreign Secretary. And the next day the agreement was signed. This is what I emphasized earlier, the power of the private sector. And I wish the other countries also follow suit. Having said all, made these 5 recommendations, a very important issue of subsidies was raised by my friend from Nepal. Let me tell you, I'm a farmer myself. There is no subsidy on wheat whatsoever. All my inputs, no, wheat we are not exporting. We have not even reaped the crop as yet. It's hard for me as a farmer, after reaping or harvesting my crop, to get my money back. That's the situation. The sugarcane is on the road, the mills. Now here the private sector also has to operate very fairly. It's loaded, the mills are not buying it. Why? If it remains loaded at the mill gate for 5 days, they get a clear advantage of there is a loss of weight. So we have to operate with a clear, balanced approach and a fair approach to all the stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subail Malik. Now, Ms. Obana, as a leading industrialist and very famous business entity in our region, representing the private sector and also representing the chamber activities, what do you think, how we can bring forward, how we can make SAARC as a vibrant entity in the world by 2030? This is, I think we should have a long-term and short-term target. We should at least have a big portion of our Asian region economy and also in the world economy by 2030. How we can go forward?
You know, I heard everybody, and I think that there's some serious points that were expressed. So I need to finish this on a more positive note and on a way forward. And I think that that comes when, if we can sit and say, and let us get around one challenge and say that let's pick up one issue and all of us start collaborating on that with this one win, then we can open up. So that would be the short-term goal, to say that you might pick the one of education. And I think that this is a problem that is there with all of us. I mean, I was with my colleague from Bhutan and he said, why is it that Indian universities don't have some reservation for international students coming from the SAARC region? I think these are whys that we should be able to share, to come, you know, wherever the best practices are. We should create this, we should be able to move and have a common education base. From there, you know, we'll move on to jobs and skilling. For us, skilling is a real big thing in India now, because we understand the challenges of Industry 4.0. And we have to be, you know, really to be selfish to our own industry, that it makes sense for us to pick up a subject like education, because at the end of the day, we are all employers. So we want to get people who are world class, who really know, and so skilling and education, I think, is something that we should pick up in the short term. Healthcare is another subject that I do believe it creates extreme diplomacy when you can open up your borders for health, I think there's nothing of a greater purpose than that, and we should be sharing that, because frugal innovation, wherever it comes from, today in the next, and it's not technology we should keep to ourselves, but the very fact, just to give you a point, sorry if I take a minute, but you know the cost of an open heart surgery in India, despite inflation, is the same price it was 25 years ago with that. It's the same price. All over the world, it's like 10 times, 20 times more expensive. And it's just because we have the lowest cost of medicine that, for whatever reasons, the government put it, and then after that, even the cost arbitrage. So this is something that all the countries around our region should learn. Why is it that we all can't deliver costs at that pricing? So maybe another subject is health. These two are social infrastructure. And then we move on. I do believe energy is a real subject that needs to be discussed. I don't know about farming. It's so much of a challenge, because every one of us have to think about our own country and what we need to produce. Just look at the eggs and the milk and the cereals that are required for Indians as the middle class starts growing. Today we're 10 million households that have an affordable population. That can afford. It'll go to 90 million. And at that point, we all have to produce. We need it from all your regions. We do need Bhutan, we do need Nepal, we do need Pakistan and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka too. So, and I think so there'll be a common need that will develop, but not now. Let's pick 2-3 points and be practical that industry can move the needle. That's the message I wanted to give.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Shobana. We are actually just finishing our time given to us, but I kindly request 5 to 6 minutes, because we started 30 minutes late. We'll give you, for the audience, 3 or 4, yes, Mr. Doji.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rohan. I have one question that I would like to pose to the eminent dais sitting on the podium. Are we as SAARC business people really committed to the SAARC movement? Are we hungry enough to push forward the program of a SAARC economic union? We talk about the EU. I think the EU was hungry enough. It was after the Second World War, destruction, famine, desperation. So that need and that hunger was there for them to think of an economic union, to come together even though they had fought wars. Are we in the SAARC region hungry enough to really want? Does FNCCI have a separate SAARC desk that looks at SAARC issues and not only the internal issues? Does CII have that? Does the Pakistan Chamber have that? Does FICCI have that? Or are we just going to have this really wonderful 3-day session, having heard wonderful speakers, and then go back to our countries and start looking at our own internal issues? Thank you.
Yeah, I just give an outlook to that. Now, we all are having federations, we all are having Chamber of Commerce in our countries, but we are blaming our bureaucrats, our politicians, that they are signing bilateral agreements and trade agreements which are no use to the industry, because they are not having any experience in industry. So I think it is the federations and the national chambers' duty to involve in the trade agreements, and we should make a case where government is seeking advices from our federations, SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, when they are going for a bilateral agreement within us and among us. So I think having a lot of experience in chamber activities, I think Mr. Zubair Malik will give you more detail.
Thank you, my former president of SAARC, CCI. You should have been here on the dais today, because according to program, you should be answering the question. But having said that, yes, definitely, I can speak for FPCCI. We do have a SAARC desk. we also have an NTM desk. And these desks were created in all the 7 chambers, federations in the 7 countries. I can only speak for my country. Both are operating. The NTM desk, which looks after these non-tariff measures and the bottlenecks in trading within the countries. We have in the SAARC desk in FPCCI. As far as your first part of the question, you answer that. Ask yourself, are we committed to SAARC? Yes, I am. I have given a part of my life to this movement, to see the SAARC vibrant. Now I can't answer on your behalf. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, hello.
Any other?
Yes. Good morning to all of you. My first question to all of the panelists here today, they all are senior leaders, and I don't want to explain all of the opportunities and things. From where we should start, this is the big question. Madam spoke about health and integration and as well as about the education. But the most important thing is agriculture commodities, which everybody in this region, we have poor people, we have people, as you said, the middle class people are increasing in this region, so we need to supply them food. That is very, very important for all of us. So let's start. We are talking about motor vehicle agreement, we are talking about all of these things. Let's start. Let's implement SAARC in all these 8 countries equally. Not only a privileges given by India to Afghanistan alone, and not a privileges given to Bangladesh by India alone. No, we have to do and we have to implement this SAFTA free trade agreement and start from agriculture commodities, which will play an essential roles. When we are talking about farmers in these regions are the people that they are giving you an energy to go up and to grow your economy. If the farmer's hard work is not there back, none of us will, what we are doing the whole day, we are eating and all this is agriculture. So we have to support and we have to start from agriculture, and thank you very much. And that is the starting point. We are unable, we are always talking nice words, we are saying this is the way forward and this is the way forward after another meetings. But we need to finalize this and we have to implement and we have to pressure all the policymakers and the governments to start implementing this SAFTA equally in all these countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Madam, you can give the best answer.
I think that, we have to find small wins to make an ultimate battle. So when you pick the biggest subject, agriculture is actually the subject that even nations like US grapple with, and Japan and all these, so and EU and everywhere. So when you ask this region, to implement the toughest one as your goal, and one is you're talking to private industries, like preaching to the choir. We would love for everything to be open in this region, and we see the importance of that. So I think the small wins, the ones that have a cultural, that have a social message are very important, and this is something that industry, just remember that all of us are industrialists. We can approach our governments, but it's not always that they have to listen to us, because they have a larger picture and they have an electorate also that they have to work with. So, but I do think that they'd be very sympathetic to some messages, and those are the messages that I think this group has to find.
Hello? Hello?
I think what Mr. Dorji has pointed out, that is the issue. Are we really committed to the concept of SAARC? When we say all of us, it's not only the chambers and the federations,
it is also the government, and primarily the government. It is the will on the part of government which implements and executes things. We can propose things, we can suggest things. Who implements it? It is the government. Mr. Zubair Malik has pointed that we in Federation of Pakistan Chambers of Commerce and SAARC chapter in Pakistan does play the role of an advocate for all these policies, and this is what it should all be. I just wanted to point out on the subject matter, turning setbacks into comebacks. But nobody has listed down the setbacks that the SAARC has faced. And nobody has pointedly made a point to propose the recommendations. May I suggest that if we want to make our sessions really useful, the SAARC, SAARC Chambers of Commerce and Industries, the international ones, the ones we are, I think they have a role to play. Individual chapters of SAARC in individual countries can only do things on a smaller scale. SAFTA is an example of the effort made by SAARC Chambers of Commerce to suggest a policy and get it approved by the government. Now, it has not been universally implemented, that's another issue. But I think it is another point that I must make is that we talk about European Union and we talk of ASEAN and we talk of Marcos all. Have we learned anything from those?
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I just want to make this point. What are the reasons for the success of EU? Those are the very reasons that we should analyze and try to follow.
Yeah, actually, to answer, I will give you the answer. This session was to start at 9 o'clock, but I think about 60% of you came after 9:45. So this is, maybe you have missed part of the thing. We talk about the subject matter very deeply, and answer for the last one, EU took 26 years to get into the strength. So we are actually still very much young. We can do it, we'll be doing it. We will make SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry vibrant in the world, having a strong place in the world as SAARC by 2030. We assure it. We will give you new energy and we'll drive it, don't worry.
But with your presidency.
We'll start. Okay, thank you very much for everybody. I think we are running short of time. Thank you very much.
I'd like to request all our panelists to kindly stay on the stage, and I'd like to request our moderator to kindly present our panelists with a token of appreciation. I'd like to request Mr. Ruwan to kindly present the token of appreciation to Ms. Sobana, to Mr. Zubair Ahmed Malik, to Mr. Daso Phoob Chireng, and to Mr. Shekhar Golcha. And I would like to invite on stage Mr. Om Raj Bhandari, Vice President, SCCI, to kindly present the token of appreciation to Mr. Ruwan Ederisingi for moderating this question. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated as we're beginning the second session right after this. And our Honorable Minister of Finance, Government of Nepal is already here. So we will begin the second session. Thank you so much to the moderator and to the panel session. I hope that our distinguished guests, panelists and moderator are with us in this room. And to all the gentlemen who are not able to find a seat near the door, I'd like to request them to kindly take a seat as we will now begin with our second session. I think throughout the past 2 days, we talked a lot about how South Asia really lacks connectivity, what are the reasons for it, and what can be done. So in this session, we'll be talking about ensuring better South Asian connectivity. And we have Honorable Dr. Yuvraj Khathiwada, Minister of Finance, Government of Nepal, with his opening remarks. The session will be moderated by Mr. Anil Chandrakar, who is the President of SAARC Inc. So I'd like to request all our distinguished panelists to kindly join us inside the hall. I'd like to request Honorable Dr. Yuvraj Khathiwada, Minister of Finance, Government of Nepal, to take his seat, along with the moderator of this session, Mr. Macky Hashim, former President SCCI, Mr. Amir Rahman, Director General, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Afghanistan, Tasa Ugen Khedjif Dorji, Vice Chairman, Singhi Group of Companies, former SAARC President, Mr. Sebastian Says, Lead Economist, GTRI South Asia, the World Bank, and Mr. Shaban Khalid, CEO, ITEA. So these gentlemen will now be discussing on investing in infrastructure, ensuring better South Asia connectivity. For economic growth and integration, we will need efficient infrastructure within the country and connectivity among the countries within the region. Connectivity has definitely been one of the weakest links of South Asia. And as per the World Bank, South Asia is going to need $2.5 trillion worth of investment to bridge that infrastructure gap. This session will look into developing cooperation infrastructure development and connecting the South Asia surface, road, rail, water, and transportation to ease movement of goods and people within the region. We would like to open this session by inviting Honorable Dr. Yuvraj Khathiwada, Minister of Finance, Government of Nepal, for his opening remarks.
Fellow panelists, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to join you this morning to share some of my thoughts on sharing prosperity through better economic integration in the region. By now, you must have been indoctrinated of the degree of integratedness of this region, which is one of the lowest in the world. And we know the reason also, perhaps, because we have very, very little physical connectivity. That hampers the flow of trade and investment as well, and also oftentimes restricts the movement of people as well, particularly when it comes to tourism. So I can see the degree of economic integration being restricted by the lapses in our infrastructural connectivity. And this is what exactly is the topic we are going to discuss in the next panel discussion. Let me just start with a few observations on what initiatives are there and what initiatives we may take further to see that infrastructure of this region can better facilitate economic integration, which would be the best way to share our prosperity. For this reason, sharing prosperity is easier when we have certain areas of, I would say, low-hanging fruits, like tourism. But for that also, we need infrastructure, at least air and road connectivity or waterways connectivity. Again, that depends on how fast we can develop our physical infrastructures. Beyond tourism, there are potential areas, hydropower, of course, or any other energy sources is another area where we can also work together to benefit from each other's strength. And similarly, there are other areas also. But let me just start with a few initiatives, how we see them through the regional perspective. There are initiatives on connectivity through regional initiative, of course, but without necessarily being within the framework of SAARC. I take BRI as an example. I take initiatives by World Bank, ADB, and AIIB, for that matter, also as initiatives which can go beyond the borders of SAARC. That only tells us that a collaboration within SAARC and in the periphery of SAARC would be necessary to have a wider perspective of not only enhancing our integrity within the region, integration within the region, but also having better integration of our region with other regions of the world. Take, for example, ASEAN or African or any European continents where they have trade and other economic unions. So, I think talking within the SAARC framework of economic integration, we must also talk how we link each other with the rest of the region. That is one fundamental issue, and there comes the role of BRI, AIB, and other development partners like the World Bank and ADB. So this is something which we need to talk. Within the SAARC region, we have much talked about integration through SAARC network. It hasn't worked well. Several agreements we have made, framework agreements also we have made, but in operationalization there are limitations to this. Today we are talking about power grid connectivity, we are talking about land route connectivity, we are talking about air route connectivity, we are even talking about waterways connectivity, inland waterways connectivity. These are our agenda which would perhaps, and more so to the landlocked countries, would help to take ourselves to the external world, even outside the SAARC region, along with developing our trade within the SAARC region. So I don't want to go into the details of this transportation system, rail, road, or waterways, but these are basic things we must also address. And then the services associated with them, the kind of agreements we are pursuing, the motor vehicles agreement and the similar kinds of other agreements as well. I think SAARC can expedite those processes. But thinking even within SAARC, there are some sub-regional initiatives, which physically they have to, because some of the SAARC countries are far off the land and they have nothing to do with the land transportation system. It is only with the countries who are connected by land have some meaningful discussion on road connectivity. So we have to come on sub-regional level of programs and arrangements also. So to say in a nutshell that while talking about economic integration in the SAARC, we have also to think about its periphery, which is beyond SAARC. Also talking within SAARC, we also need to talk about sub-regional cooperation, regional cooperation in infrastructure. So these are the three components on which we have to work. Now I come to Nepal, a country in severe infrastructure deficit, also because our policy priorities of the past. We invested a lot of money on the social sector, also being committed to achieve the MDGs, which is basically our orientation to social indicators. We achieved most of them. Now, we realize that having achieved social indicators, we are far behind in many other indicators, which the Sustainable Development Goals are now flagging on, SDGs. There we see that the infrastructure gap has been so large that it will take several decades if we don't expedite our investment programs to achieve the connectivity in infrastructure. So our focus has now shifted to more to physical infrastructure and to sustain the investments made in the social sector. So the priority is infrastructure. Our government, in its election manifesto, which has been approved or mandated by the people, it has committed large infrastructure projects in the next 5 years' time. And when we do a costing of those commitments, the annual investment requirement would almost touch 20% of GDP. Forget 10%, which is said to be the average requirement for SAARC region. We need double the average of the region. 20% of GDP is not a small amount. Now, the government's total budget is 40% of GDP. Can you spend half of the money on infrastructure alone as government? No. Outright answer is no. We don't have that capacity. That only tells that now we have to find partners, strategic partners to come in infrastructure. And that obviously we should look for the private sector to come in. And I know not all the infrastructures can come in a business model through the private sector. But there are vehicles, there are ways, there are means by which we can make not so viable infrastructure projects also to be viable when we partner with the private sector. We know the tools, including the PGF, viable funding gaps measurements. We are enacting laws to be transparent on that also. Our laws will tell in what condition, to what level, and at what procedure we would be able to participate in the BGF modality of making any enterprise a business, investment or business kind of project. So there we have been working. And I urge that let private sector also come up with proper agenda to work with us. We are ready to also collaborate on those things. The current modality of our infrastructure development is complementary rather than competing. Government wants to complement with the private sector in several of those infrastructure areas. And we want to create enabling an environment for the private sector where they can go in a business model. For example, energy generation, could be transmission, and also several other areas, including in tourism. There we are very open. Government wants to facilitate the private sector to come on in these areas, but in some areas where private sector feels handicapped because there are no infrastructure at the public sector level, the government will also do so by having dialogue and discussion with the private sector, and we'll work on that. There are some other areas where we need to create some infrastructure which look like a very small thing but makes a lot of difference to us, is the kind of special economic zones. The infrastructure is lacking there. We have been proposing several special economic zones where some of the private sector activities could come in, but still we need some partnership even in developing such economic zones. So we are open also to discuss with the private sector to have special economic zones, which would not only facilitate the investors to bring in money without falling in hassle for land acquisition or land purchase, and also some other infrastructures which we can create for business to come in. So, other than the transport and energy infrastructure, we're also talking about some industrial infrastructure in which private sector can also come in. To encourage the private sector in it, we are open and we are ready to discuss the tax regime. We are ready to discuss the foreign exchange regime. We are also ready to discuss the investment and capital market regulations. Let's sit together, work together, and see how we can work together. With these few remarks, let me conclude, and we have eminent panels, so I don't want to take up their time. So I could just conclude my observations here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Dr. Yogaraj Katmandu, Minister of Finance, Government of Nepal. The subject matter of this session is investment in infrastructure, ensuring better South Asian connectivity. Honorable Minister has now just spelled out in broad outline the necessity for private sector to come in and help governments to get into this business of investment in the infrastructure. The economic growth and integration needs efficient infrastructure within the country and connectivity among the countries within the region. Connectivity has been the weakest link in South Asia. As per the World Bank reports, South Asia needs $2.5 trillion worth of investment to bridge the infrastructure gap. Infrastructure, especially those infrastructure which connects markets and producers from across the national borders, provides the biggest opportunity for partnership. The infrastructure development covers rail, road, water and air transportation to ease movement. Honorable Minister very clearly said, we don't have to look into the South Asian region alone in this subject matter. We have to go outside the South Asian region. There are agencies like the World Bank and other agencies which will come in to help you out. Today we have in the panel Mr. Amir Rami, Director General, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan. Dasho Yugen Chechuf Dorji, past President of the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Vice Chairman of Singay Group of Companies of Bhutan. Mr. Sebastian Saiz, Lead Economist, GTRI South Asia, the World Bank. And Mr. Shaban Khalid, CEO, Etihad Steel Industries. I don't think he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is open for the panelists to voice their opinion on this particular subject matter. I would like to just inform the panelists that each one of them will have 8 to 10 minutes because we are restricted by timeline to finish this session by 1 hour. So based on the Finance Minister's observations, I would like to invite firstly our World Bank representative. Your name is not here.
Good morning, Honorable Minister, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for inviting me to join this session. I don't think I will take 8 or 10 minutes, but I would like to share with you some of the ideas and the work that the World Bank is doing in the region on connectivity and infrastructure. But let me first start saying that during these 3 days of meetings, I was able to attend several of the sessions, and in all of the sessions, the common theme was connectivity. Whether we are talking about tourism, whether we are talking about agribusiness or food processing industries, or whether we are talking about digital economy. So this clearly is one of the most important enablers of the integration of the regions. And I think that in this regard, the subject itself is very important and the discussion is very timely. But not only for the region, but in particular for many landlocked countries in the regions, Bhutan, Nepal or Afghanistan, this is a clearly very important agenda. And the research of the World Bank has shown that landlocked countries confront much more bigger challenge in order to connect to the rest of the world due to their landlocked situation. And in this regard, the bank is also recommending that neighboring countries needs to support particularly those landlocked countries in order to facilitate their connection to the rest of the world. But also, I think that we need to look at the importance of connectivity and infrastructure more broadly and put it in the context of the individual country's aspiration as well. Connectivity is clearly a very important determinant of the participation in value chains in many of the countries. And also, in a recently published report by the bank on the future of manufacturing, or what has been popularly discussed as Industry 4.0, it shows that report that, again, connectivity is one of the most important determinants of what countries, on how countries will be able to take on board the opportunities that are opened by the new technologies, but at the same time, how they will be able to take on board or address the challenges created by these new technologies that are changing the way we are producing goods and services. But in order to address connectivity, and this is something that is going to be disseminated in a report that is going to be launched in a couple of weeks, the most important thing is how to create a framework to analyze the connectivity, how countries will analyze how to invest in connectivity and, for instance, on corridors. So we're used to talk about transport corridors, but the research has shown that the most profitable transport corridors are those that are transformed into economic corridors, which means that when in assessing the investment opportunities on transport corridors, we need to take into consideration all the neighboring economic activities that would benefit this, because of this investment. And we need to make sure that we are going to be able to connect those economic activities and facilitate the creation of skills and economic opportunities to connect to the transport corridors. So that's one thing. Also, it is important to take into consideration the design of the project. And in this regard, there are three critical elements. First of all, of course, the design should be contextualized in the first place, taking into consideration the hard infrastructure investment, ports, airports, roads, and of course, rail. Then we need to think about complementary policies that are necessary to be in place. So the most evident one is about the transport and facilitation of services around the corridors, because otherwise we will going to invest in corridors, and if we don't create these enabling facilitation measures, then basically we are not going to facilitate the connectivity of countries. And of course, there is also the soft infrastructure. When we think about soft infrastructure, we are thinking as well in terms of the institutions that could support the advantages created by the hard infrastructure, as well as the trade facilitation measures that I mentioned, as well as policies. Policies that need to be in place, complementary policies that need to be in place in order to take advantage of the investments. So our research in other regions has shown that in many cases, the investment in infrastructure, in particular on corridor or transport infrastructure, has not provided the full benefits because, for instance, certain practices, in particular non-competitive practices, have not been reformed. So there is also a need to look at the complementary policies to take full advantage of the investment that the countries are doing. Last but not least, of course, there is the implementation challenge. You know, we can have a perfectly well-designed project, but then there is an implementation challenge, and the implementation challenge means that we need to coordinate among the different countries which are involved. We need to take into consideration the communities, and last but not least, bring the private sector into the picture. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sebastian. The World Bank, Mr. Sebastian, has outlined how investment in infrastructure is designed. The design is there, backed by policy. Then it comes to how implementation process is going to be worked out. Out of all those things, the implementation comes out with the formalities and the policies of our governments of this region. And the last line that we punched was the participation of the private sector. Based on this, I would like to invite our past president, Mr. Dorji, to voice his opinion, and he's a very strong opinionated man who has a lot of knowledge about the infrastructure, because he is involved in transportation. And I'm sure we would be benefited by his knowledge and his opinions.
Thank you, Macky. I'd like to first of all say that it gives me great pleasure to be sitting amongst such illustrious members on the dais, and also like to thank the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industries for inviting me to be a panelist on this session. I don't know how much I know about transportation, but I know that I've been transported to different regions a lot in the SAARC region.
He knows this because he comes from a landlocked country, and he knows all the problem that he goes through.
One of the things which, an analogy I'd like to use is if Genghis Khan had donkeys instead of really sturdy horses that moved him really fast across where he reigned, he would not have been known as one of the largest conquerors in the history of the world. Likewise, if we don't find ways and means to transport our products and produces in the region in an efficient, cost-effective manner, then we will not be winning the battle for economy. I think what the World Bank representative has correctly pointed out is that there are two issues in South Asia. One is the issue of the landlocked countries, and one is, of course, countries that have the water bodies. And the other thing also we have to look at is the landlocked countries are very mountainous regions. Maybe Afghanistan is a little more fortunate than Nepal and Bhutan, but especially Bhutan, we are restricted by the very narrow valleys that we have. So the largest plane that can come into Bhutan, that can land into Bhutan, is an Airbus 320. So therefore, even if you think of cargo, even if you think of air transport, it still becomes very, very expensive for us to move products and produces to the SAARC region as well as outside the SAARC region. So therefore, land transport becomes a huge, something that is very, very important for Bhutan. And therefore, the idea of the PPP model, the idea of inviting the private sector to now get involved with the public sector to implement infrastructure, I think is very, very important. I think the times when our governments in the South Asia region looked at the responsibility of infrastructure development lying in the hands of the government should pass. I know that a lot of countries within South Asia are already looking at it, but I don't think we're progressing fast enough. But at the same time, when we progress, we also need to be a little bit cautious. We need to be cautious in the sense that we need to look at sustainable development. You know, one of the things which I'm sure we as a generation and the future generation would not like to live in a construction yard. You know, more and more we see ourselves living in a construction yard because the planning is not being done properly. We need 8-lane highways. What we do is initially we build 4-lane highways. And suddenly we realize that traffic is caught up, movement of goods have caught up, and then we start building the 8-lane highways. So perpetually, wherever we go, here in Kathmandu, traveling in Delhi, in Mumbai, traveling in Pakistan, all these SAARC countries, you see roads being dug up, you see construction going on, metros being built. So constantly you are almost like living in a construction yard. And I don't think this is something that we want to see. The other thing also is that initially we invest in infrastructure. The infrastructure is wonderful. But at the same time, if we don't look at the movement of people, even though it's not a physical infrastructure, the constraints to infrastructure and to movement of people, I look at it beyond just the physical infrastructure. You know, I see that if the ports are there, but the people manning the ports are not efficient. If the systems within the port is not efficient, even if you have the biggest port, you'll have ships stuck at the port for days and days, which causes losses, which causes business to become uneconomical. In the land crossings, if you have huge roads that ply big trucks, but at the same time, the process of movement of goods is restricted and constrained by the processes in the customs, then that itself also is a constraint. So I think when we look at infrastructure, I would like to look beyond just the physical infrastructure that we have within SAARC to integrate ourselves as an economy. Immigration is another issue. Visas is another issue. These are all part of infrastructure, connected to infrastructure. Though, of course, in the morning when I had my discussion with Macky, he felt that maybe this is something that is not a point that falls within the subject. But I felt that just creating physical infrastructure itself is not going to allow us to integrate economically within the South Asia region. We have to go a little beyond that. We have to look at the possibility of improving the cross-border and the points of access. I think we also have to look beyond. You know, there's a lot of fear that if you build a big road between Pakistan and India, or big road between Afghanistan and Pakistan, or a huge bridge, if in the future possible, between Sri Lanka and India, that it is an accessibility for the armies to march in. I think we should think beyond that. I think it's no longer about armies marching into one another's country. I think it's about benefit through economy, where the whole SAARC region, through infrastructure development, can grow as an economic region. Thank you.
Thank you, Ugen. As I told you, Mr. Ugen thinks out of the box. All what you heard, what he said, is completely out of the box. This morning, when he was trying to discuss with me, I was trying to dissuade him from telling this. But he convinced me. Apart from the roadways, ports, airports, there are a lot of other things that connectivity is concerned with. When I come from Sri Lanka, when I enter the airport of Kathmandu, I must be able to pass through that without any difficulty. When I go to Singapore, it takes me only maximum 8 minutes out of the airport, out of the plane, immigration, get my baggage anyway. Each one of you would have gone through the same process in any one of our South Asian countries. That is exactly what Ugen was trying. So we must think of connectivity of people. As he rightly said, construction, construction, construction. Perpetually you are in construction. So let us think a little out of the way. As Finance Minister in his opening remarks also said, integration is there, but there are so many roadblocks to integration. So let us take the examples outside our region and see how African Union, European Union and other unions are working. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite our Director General or Minister of Foreign Affairs, Afghanistan, Amir Yamin. Now he also comes more or less from a landlocked country. He has a lot of difficulties. Afghanistan is a landlocked country, has a lot of difficulties. We would like to listen to him, sir.
Thank you very much, Rahim. First of all, it's an honor and privilege to be among the distinguished panelists, and I want to take this opportunity to thank the government of Nepal for hosting, but also SAARC Chamber of Commerce and SAARC Secretariat for organizing this important event. I think there's no doubt that private sector is the backbone of the economy, and when it comes to regional cooperation and regional integration, it plays an important role. So what I'll do is, in my 5 minutes, I will try to talk about briefly, 5 to 8 minutes, I will try to briefly talk about what do we do in Afghanistan, what does my directorate do, and then the second thing I will do is to brief you about how, where do we stand when it comes to connectivity, and how can Afghanistan contribute to SAARC or South Asia's connectivity. Director General for Regional Cooperation initially started in 2012, and the key purpose at the time and recognition was that we need to engage in multilateralism in the region, because we have certain priorities, especially economic, but also political and security. It requires a multilateral approach in the region. It's no longer only our bilateral interactions, but interactions with a greater and wider group of countries in the region that also sometimes requires entities in countries beyond the region, and World Bank, ADB, other important organizations are the primary examples. Our key purpose in my directorate, the regional cooperation, is to see how we can facilitate, how we can use the political process and in certain areas, certain security initiatives to support the economic integration, the economic process. And obviously SAARC is a very important organization for Afghanistan because we are a member of SAARC and we pay great value to our membership to SAARC and to our cooperation with SAARC countries. So that is the key focus of where I come from. And I agree that there are certain difficulties when it comes to being a landlocked country, but the vision that we have now developed in Afghanistan is how to turn this into an advantage. As you all know, Afghanistan borders 6 countries, starting from Pakistan, Iran, China, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. But also, it is the country that actually connects, the only country that has the closest route that can connect or connects South Asia with Central Asia. And our vision, on which we have been trying to build our initiatives and efforts, including through the SAARC, is to turn landlocked Afghanistan into a land bridge. So we can be a bridge connecting Central Asia to South Asia. In terms of connectivity, we have a number of routes, trade and transit routes, but also a number of new initiatives and corridors that are underway that can really contribute to the connectivity of South Asia, but also Central Asia. One of the closest routes that we have and can connect to South Asia is obviously through or via Pakistan. We had an agreement with Pakistan that is now under negotiation because it expired in 2015. It was AFTA, Afghanistan-Pakistan Trade and Transit Agreement. One of the difficulties that we have had is to be able to access other countries in South Asia via Pakistan. That has been a difficulty. And I think in the new draft of the AFTA that is under negotiation, we are trying to make sure that we address this challenge to be able to provide actually South Asia, including Pakistan, access to Central Asia, resource-rich Central Asia, and then again Afghanistan and Central Asia to South Asia via Afghanistan. This is one important focus that we are working right now on. The other one, most of you may have heard, is the Chabahar corridor or transit port hub. Chabahar is a project that we have been working closely with Iran, our neighbor, but also India. In 2015, we had a trilateral agreement that was signed by all the leadership of the 3 countries in Tehran. And this year it was actually started to be operationalized, and the first transport of certain items came to Afghanistan via Chabahar. Chabahar is another platform or route for Afghanistan to be able to access South Asia, but also allow South Asia, India, as well as other countries in South Asia to access Central Asia. And I think I would like to encourage all the private sector leaders here to take the opportunity and visit Chabahar and to see how they can explore the possibilities there. These are the 2 key routes that can provide South Asia to actually access Central Asia. And I think the wider we can connect, the more benefits we will be able to acquire for our people and for our communities. We also have other initiatives on how we can actually connect Central Asia via Afghanistan to South Asia. Recently, we have had substantial development in terms of trade and transit with Central Asia, particularly Uzbekistan. We, via Uzbekistan, are now opening the possibility of a new corridor to be able to access China. Uzbekistan connects to Kazakhstan and then to China, but also via Uzbekistan to Russia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Russia. But also another corridor that we are exploring, and also we have had support from ADB, but also other entities, is the 5-nation railway. The 5-nation railway is aimed to connect China with Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. Certain infrastructure has been built. We have the connectivity link now started to be completed between Herat and Turkmenistan, which is another way, and this will also connect to the five-nation railway. In terms of energy, earlier this month, we had the inauguration of the first phase of the TAPI, which is Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, which will allow Turkmenistan's gas to actually be transported to Pakistan and India via Afghanistan. So I think there are a lot of initiatives via Afghanistan, and I think those initiatives will provide considerable progress when it comes to economic cooperation, economic integration in the region, but also connectivity between the Central Asia and South Asia, putting Afghanistan as a land bridge. But challenges are also there. I think, first of all, governments, and I as the representative of the government, really feel that we need to do more. I think there are certain governments who need to certainly do more. I think connectivity, especially when it comes to trade and transit, must become a focus, must become a priority. It is a great indication of our commitment, especially the motor vehicle, the railway agreements. I think those are key agreements that need to be materialized, and I think we need to look how we can seek the support of the private sector to address the challenges that we have, especially with regards to some governments who haven't come to the decision to support the materialization and operationalization of those agreements. But also, obviously, security is a challenge, but sometimes our perception of security is a challenge because, I agree with the SAARC Chamber of Commerce President, who in his opening remarks very elaborately mentioned that people who apply for a visa are not people who can pose threats. I think those who pose threats sometimes try to seek illegal ways to enter certain countries and to create problems. And I think that is an issue that we certainly need to address. But also, soft infrastructure, I agree with all the panelists, is very important, I think. So we need to provide opportunities to connect more people, to connect more business leaders with each other, but also have a bottom-up approach as well to make sure that our people push for certain changes, for certain developments to take place. So with that, I would like to conclude and thank you all once again.
Thank you, Mr. Amir Ramin. It's very delightfully interesting to listen to the Director General coming from the governmental side. The important factor that he said was multilateral connection. Instead of bilateral, we should go multilateral also. And the important statement that he made was that they are looking forward to change the landlocked country perception of Afghanistan and build a land bridge to connect the other South Asian countries with the CIS countries. I think that's an important factor economically also. They have their own problems, but they have identified the problems and they're focusing on how to overcome. So it is very important for all of us to know, based on our Honorable Finance Minister's earlier statement, governments are intending to do good for the people, but the private sector has to also take the responsibility of partnering with the governments. All governments bring policies for progress. With that come bureaucratic blockades. So the private sector must be able to engage themselves, convincing the governments in all these countries with their policies, overcoming the blockades that are made by the bureaucracy. So it's not a difficult thing, because as the earlier session chairman, Mr. Malik, earlier session, he was saying, it is the private sector who funds the governments. who gives jobs to the people and keeps the government in power. So we must be able to engage ourselves and get the best out of each of their governments. I'm sure Honorable Finance Minister will agree with this and Director General of Foreign Affairs. We have now, based on these presentations which you have just heard, I would like to invite Mr. Shaban Khalid, CEO, steel industry. This is a private sector perception that he is coming to announce.
The good thing about speaking last is everything's been said already. But the problem now is, what do I say? Anyways, so I think it's been mentioned previously also, there's 2.5 million infrastructure gap in South Asia. $5 trillion. I mean, I don't think there's rocket science to understand that $2.5 trillion of infrastructure projects to get started will be a complete revolution to the economies of these countries. So, and these some of the sectors, I think we mentioned transport, but there's electricity, there's water, there's agriculture. Agriculture being very primary because that's also food security. Urban planning and technology, and one of the things that we've now taken on, which is as important as any other thing, including transport, is technology. Because the next big thing, which now is, it's not the next big thing, it already exists. The now big thing is technology. And how that shrinks businesses and how it brings people closer. Because we talk about connectivity, and technology plays a major role in connectivity, despite all the hurdles that we have in this part of the world. So I'd like to approach this infrastructure problem as a vicious cycle of burden on economy. So any infrastructure gap that arises is actually a vicious cycle that adds more burden to the economies. And I'll give you an example. So we all know there's about 41% population in South Asia that do not have access to proper washing facilities. So what does that do? That adds to health problems, that adds to child mortality problems, and so on and so forth. So that again adds to more burden to the economy. So I think we need to address not just infrastructure on what we see, but the implications that that infrastructure has. And I think one of the problems is, you know, we keep blaming the policymakers and the politicians, but unfortunately, my experience and what we see in this part of the world especially, the population is, let's just say, they're more impatient. They do not leave an incentive for the policymakers and the politicians to take a long-term approach. And why I say that, a voter wants a quick fix to his problem. Like what he sees in the next weeks or months, and not what he will see down the road 7, 8 years or 10 years down the road. So that really does not leave much incentive for the politicians to make the long-term approaches that we want. Because a hydropower project is not going to happen in 1 year. It's going to take 7 to 10 years. So we all know the energy problem. We have a solution to the energy problem in this part of the world, which is hydro. And we have the potential also, but unfortunately, why have we not taken that approach? Because I think, this is my take on it, and I could be wrong. I think the voter does not have that patience to wait for that 7 to 8 years. So I think one of the approaches that we may need to take is teach the voter that that vote holds value. Do not vote for somebody who's going to give you a quick fix. Do not vote for somebody who is just going to brush off your vote or buy it without giving something which is actually going to give you something tangible in return for the longer term, for your economy. And as I said, coming back, it is a vicious, so you have to put both these things together. It's a vicious cycle of burden to the economy, which then translates down to problems for each individual of that economy, plus that vote bank which you use, that vote that you use every election term to elect the right person or not. So that's what I see as some of the problem that we have. And I think what the private sector and the SAARC chamber and all these chambers together being the driving force behind economic activity need to start these sessions education sessions, training sessions to these voters, explaining how valuable that vote is. Because if you are voting in somebody who's not going to bring in that infrastructure change, don't complain then. So, number two, and I move on. So, we have a, as I said, long-term approach. Some of the countries inherited from the colonial times a massive infrastructure, which back then was very efficient. Unfortunately, we have not revived, revolutionized, or done anything substantial to that infrastructure, whether that's a railway. And who does not know, and I think this has been said earlier also, who does not know railway is the most efficient and the cheapest way to transport goods to the market, from the manufacturer to the end market. And again, once again, vicious cycle, roads need burden on roads, pollution, and at the end of the day, expensive product that reaches the consumer. But unfortunately, we've not done anything substantial to the railroad, and whether that's the irrigation system, the agriculture system, so on and so forth. There was public-private partnership. Yes, public-private partnership, but there's only so much public-private partnership that one can take on. But unfortunately, the public-private partnership is a great solution country-wise, but we're talking about just region-wise. It will help the country, individual country, but does it help the connectivity between? So again, the policy has to come in again. As you said rightly, the policy needs to be addressed, and once again, the private sector needs to push. And I think, so the problems, I think, by and large, in South Asia are very common, with a few customizations to individual areas. One of the things I think what could and should happen is the private sector from the countries do extensive research on very targeted infrastructure problems, whether that's education, whether that's road network, and then bring that solution out to the public and let the government take on, because this is something that is common. I think one of the key problems to all our infrastructure problems is unfortunately something that we've not addressed, is the population growth. I think it all stems, most of it stems from the population growth that we see in this part of the world. I think this is also something that we need to address if we want to, because this is one of the longer term approaches, and I think where that comes, where the private sector does come in again, is we need to start educating our masses that, this burden of what you're complaining of is also because your size of household is massive, and the country's resources are not able to match the expansion of your household vis-a-vis the resources. So I think these are some things that I would want to like to see addressed by the government, the private sector, and hopefully the SAARC Chamber of Commerce as well. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Interesting perception. We have to, either the private sector, SAARC Chamber and other organizations, have to actively, intensively participate with the policy making of each of these governments. Unless we are strong to participate in the policy making, governments will make their own policies without taking into consideration what the people. Therefore, the punchline is that we as SAARC Chamber and the private sector organization must aggressively address our opinions to the government. I personally don't blame government. If I become a politician and become a minister, I will be also part and parcel of that segment of people. We just heard the Honourable Minister in his opening remarks how beautifully he outlined and told us what are the roadblocks that what he said was, you see, integration we are all talking about is restricted by physical roadblocks. Physical roadblocks is not the roadblocks that we see in roads, but there are roadblocks which come from various sections. As I told you earlier, maybe bureaucracy, But the active participation of the private sector is not there. Now, important factor that Khalid came out with, we have not educated our population, especially on a subject that none of us ever thought in any of the conferences. That is, restricting population growth. If you can tell your people, restrict your population growth according to the resources that you have, then your country, now for example, European Union is successful, purely because their population is small. Now railway is another thing that he said, was a very important connectivity factor. Now our railways are still going on the British railway system, is that right? Now Britain, long years ago, divested some of their railways to the private sector. If you go in the London region, it is all not British railway but run by the government. It is by private sector companies. Look at the success of the Japanese railway. They are also purely because they are very successful because they have taken participation. But we are still, and the cheapest mode of transport for any of our products is the railway, which none of us have ever thought of. We are all looking for trucks. When you can, from any port in India, go up to Nepal or Bhutan in a cheaper manner. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, I think this session, we have got these panelists who have opinion voiced by them is very important for our discussion. Now, I have come to the end of each panelist session. Will anybody like to ask any question from our panelists? So that we make your question short, don't give your opinion, but ask the question. And only announce your name, please. Yes, carry on.
Honorable Minister and Excellencies in this panel. Honorable Minister, my question is very simple. SAARC has been operating all political and from 1992 all these SAARC CCI as well. So we all discuss all these good words. We all know the challenges, we all know the problems, we also know our opportunities what are in this region. But my simple question is, how to implement? I'm saying that it is not the time to implement the SAFTA, which is start with agriculture commodities, not with all commodities, which is the need of every home and all these farmers get supported by these agricultural commodities. And if we can implement, today when the crops went wrong in India, the question is, I'm just giving examples. The farmers do a suicide in India. So that is a challenge for all of us. I think if we can start with agriculture commodities integration and implement that SAFTA equally in all these 8 countries, that will be a wonderful start for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jalali.
Question. I would only say at this moment that we are not homogeneous in terms of our level of agricultural development and also in terms of our agricultural subsidy policies. We are heterogeneous. The subsidy regimes are not governed within the SAARC framework. They are governed beyond the SAARC trade framework. And we know, being member of WTO, there are arrangements by which the GATT members have the privilege to subsidize their business more than the countries which joined WTO after 1995. So the anomaly is there. So between these anomalies, how to bring in complementarity between our agricultural sectors within the region is an issue. Take for example, Nepal and India have open border. We have to exchange goods and services without much of the restriction. Then we have to see what of the products we can have comparative advantage to that of India so that we can trade. So we have to find our own areas of advantage. If we can harmonize our agricultural policy, that would be far better. But I don't see that happening right now because, as I said, of the heterogeneous policy regimes. And now, what remains to be done in collaboration is the technology transfer. your own best practices, your own ways, how you have been able to increase productivity, how you have been able to better intervene in the market to stabilize food prices, and the distribution system. So if I have to borrow something from my neighboring country, it would be perhaps the public distribution system rather than talking about agricultural policy. So just in a sentence, let's try to get the best practices in agriculture that our countries in the neighborhood have done and try to also accelerate. That's it.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I have time only for 2 more questions because the ladies have already got seated down here because the session of the women are next. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. Sonam Mondi, Ministry of Economic Affairs, Bhutan. Transaction or transport costs are a major element for viability. Now, there are some countries that have been left out of the most efficient modes of transport. Now, I'm talking about railways and water transport, that's a riverine transport. My question is, how can either SAARC, the regional forum, or the private sector help in ensuring these countries that have been left out, that these are prioritized? For example, Nepal and Bhutan, we've got large rivers flowing down right to the sea, riverine transport. How could that be prioritized? Bhutan still does not have railway links. How, because this is not bilateral, it needs a multilateral regional approach. How can that, though I know there's a railway agreement, but it's going nowhere. Thank you.
Okay. Would Mr. Sebastian be able to answer that question, sir? No. Oh, Khalid? Would you like to say something? Mr. Sebastian. Another question, but he's just asked for us because we talked about the waterway connectivity, railway connectivity, the cheapest mode of transport. How can governments help, private sector? Is that the question? Is that right? Would anybody like to answer that question? How we can facilitate to increase the transportation of goods by railway and by waterways? Right?
Macky,
yeah, okay.
Just a short thought on this. I think when you're talking about Bhutan and Nepal, you know, there are no waterways up in the north. There are waterways only down in the south, east and west. So I think in my personal view, the concept of the pushing forward the economic union and the economic integration on a sub-regional level needs to be strengthened, sub-regionally, because this problem is restricted to a few countries, you know, and therefore I feel that sub-regionally we need to take this matter up. I think the political will has to be there because it is a necessity for the private sector. So it's not that the private sector doesn't need it as doesn't consider it important, but the political will to give our 2 countries the waterway rights and the railway links needs to be felt.
Okay. Mr. Amin would also like to say a few words.
This would probably also address the question that was asked earlier. So I think we need to recognize that more trade is good, more connectivity is good. It will help the welfare of all of us as a bloc, as a region.
Cost of transport.
Absolutely. And then I think political will, I would agree. One other thing that we really need to recognize and identify is our comparative and competitive advantages. I think agriculture, if Afghanistan is not a good place for growing agriculture under the current circumstances, and if it is more expensive, let's allow other countries in which agriculture can be less expensive, but see what is our competitive or comparative advantage. If pomegranate is better and it's more expensive and easily available in Afghanistan, how can we, this is the key, transport Afghanistan's pomegranate to where it is needed, and for example India or Pakistan's wheat to Afghanistan or other parts of the world. So to identify our comparative and competitive advantages and to make sure that we facilitate the political will to exchange them with each other.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I think the baseline is, you'd like to ask, that lady wants to ask the last question.
So I just wanted to My name is Susan Matthew. I work for a civil society organization called Cuts International. We have fortunately done some work on inland waterways among the BBIN countries, and that is a follow-up question to Mr. Dorji here. Bhutan has already signed an MOU with Bangladesh for inland waterway transit through Chittagong and Monglabu. The interesting part here is Bhutan intends to use the Brahmaputra route in India under the GATT, General Agreement on Tariff and Trade Agreement. Unfortunately, we did hold a consultation for private sector partners from Bhutan, India and Bangladesh to come together and talk about it so that we can come to a protocol. But that did not happen because the private sector in Bhutan were like, the oranges that we need to export would never survive the waterway transport that goes all the way to Bangladesh. Do you have any inputs on that, if at all?
Question will be answered by the President of the Ministry of Economic Affairs.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think this type of forum has brought all of us together, and a lot of those burning questions amongst us are now surfacing. So we will definitely find out. Actually, that is why the SAARC Chamber of Commerce is there. It explicitly announced that the private sector headed by SAARC Chamber of Commerce had to be aggressively sort of influencing the governments. Governments have to make the policies, but while making policies, I think the private sector participation is important to influence, which should be better. Now you see the important question about this transport by railroad and waterways has just emerged in this conference, and we all know what is the importance of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think, having listened to all of us, thank you very much for the panelists and the Honourable Minister. And on behalf of the SAARC Chamber of Commerce, I just request the Honourable Minister to make a punchline last statement to close the sessions.
That's the most difficult job. Thank you anyway. It's just like I'll reveal what our moderator said. That's what I speak should be heard by our fellow government colleagues coming from the SAARC region. I think we'll use it intergovernmental stage to discuss intergovernmental issues. Today we discuss more the issues related to the private sector and the government. So intergovernmental issues will pick up and address at the proper stage. But for now, what we get the message from all this discussion is that governments are on board to bring in private sector along in the whole process of connectivity, and that's not related to only physical connectivity. We are also talking connectivity of the people based on their physical connectivity, and learn from each other's practice as to what kind of infrastructure has best served the country. Take for example railway. India is the largest railway network we have. We haven't benefited, like Bhutan and Nepal, we haven't benefited much from there. Also there are connectivities from other countries outside the SAARC region. The issue related here is of making the system also compatible to each other. If we have road, rail or waterways connectivity, we have to ensure that they are also compatible to the whole region's infrastructure that we have been creating. I think this is where the engineers and technical team would have to work. But on waterways, just a couple of sentences on the waterways. Nepal has seriously taken up the kind of our right to waterways, particularly in the inland waterways to the high sea. Particularly when the big Ganga River of India possesses 70% of the dry season water and 40% of the wet season water in the Ganges, and we have been discussing this issue that perhaps we could better have access to the Ganges River through which we can use the inland waterways to reach the ports. This is an issue which we work. That means we also have an opportunity to work on the waterways. I would just stop here.
Thank you very much. I think we must congratulate the Minister of Finance for giving us this encouraging news. Government is prepared to work with you. you be ready, aggressively influence the government policies. Thank you very much to all the panelists. It was very interesting. And thank you all.
Indeed, thank you so much to all our panelists and to Honorable Minister of Finance. I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Suraj Vaidya, the President of SCCI, to kindly present the token of appreciation to Honorable Dr. Yuvraj Khatiwada, Minister of Finance, Government of Nepal, for his opening remarks. To our moderator, Mr. Macky Hashim, former President, SCCI, Mr. Amir Rami, Director General, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Afghanistan, Daso Ugen Dorji, President, SAARC, Mr. Sebastian Says, Lead Economist, GTRI South Asia, the World Bank, and Mr. Shaban Khalid, CEO, Etihad Steel. We will now take a group photograph and then we shall have a 10 minutes tea break and then we'll begin our next session. And I'd like to specially request all the gentlemen to kindly stay back because the next session is filled with women and we're discussing strengthening connectivity and trade in South Asia, the case for gender responsive logistics. So I'd like to request all the gentlemen and the ladies in the room to kindly be back for the third session for this morning. Strengthening.
Thank you so much. And first, on behalf of the Australian Government, allow me to thank SAARC Business Leaders for organising this conference and all distinguished panellists, guests and participants here today. And thanks also to the World Bank for moderating this session. Australia is pleased to support this session because, as highlighted in the Australian Government Foreign Policy White Paper, gender equity and women's empowerment is at the forefront of our foreign policy because it is fundamental to our economic and security interests. Australia also recognises acutely that our economic and security interests are tied to the Indo-Pacific region, the fastest growing region in the world. Australia also appreciates the opportunities that a rapidly changing, technologically advanced global trading system presents to the private sector, within which women must be key contributors as consumers, investors and policy makers. This is why we welcome the role of regional organisations like SAARC in bringing together South Asian governments to capture the economic and commercial gains of a more integrated global and regional trading system. As affirmed by earlier sessions, regional cooperation and integration is vital for long-term inclusive growth, sustainability and stability. Australia is strongly committed to an open, rules-based trading system for two main reasons. The first of these is fairness. Whether you're in a small, least developed country, an emerging developing country, or one of the most advanced industrialised nations, a common set of mutually agreed trade rules as negotiated in the WTO delivers a level playing field with a referee to handle disputes and unfair trade practices. The second is economic efficiency. Open trading systems are proven to be most effective in delivering sustained and inclusive economic growth and poverty alleviation. Australia knows this from its own experience. During the 1970s and 80s, successive Australian governments made some politically difficult calls to abolish nearly all of our tariffs and quotas, to end subsidies to inefficient industries, to privatise most state-owned enterprises, and to institute a range of pro-competitive, pro-business regulations. As a result, Australia has enjoyed 27 years of uninterrupted economic growth, the longest period of economic growth of any developed country. Australia's open economy improves our competitiveness, generates more and better paying jobs, gives us access to new ideas and technology, supplements our pool of domestic savings and lowers prices for consumers. But the path to reform was not easy, so we understand some of the challenges that face South Asia. Foremost amongst these challenges is to effectively advocate the win-win opportunities of reforms in environments where vested interests are often focused on protecting their pieces of the pie rather than focusing on the bigger picture that our mutual interests are served by making the pie bigger and increasing everyone's share of that larger pie. The evidence is clear that those countries more open to trade grow faster, have been more successful at reducing poverty. But trade, liberalisation measures to leverage technological progress must be accompanied by competitive and inclusive regulatory policy. This is why Australia will continue to promote an open, inclusive and prosperous Indo-Pacific region in which the rights of all states are respected and which governments govern for the governed. South Asia is the second most rapidly growing sub-region in the Asia-Pacific region after East Asia. The World Bank in 2015 reported that South Asia's gross domestic product has grown by 7.1% annually between 2000 and 2015, a much higher pace than the world average of 2.6%. The counter to this is that while intra-regional trade in South Asia has also been steadily increasing, the share of intra-regional trade and total trade has remained stagnant or low, ranging between 5 and 7% over the last decade. Compare this to other intra-regional trade under other free trade arrangements. For the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, it is 25%. For NAFTA, 50%. For the EU, 62% of total trade. This suggests there are a number of key obstacles and constraints holding back more intensive inter-regional trade in the South Asia region. Australia believes that the first of these is the lack of hard and soft infrastructure to connect business and traders across the region. The ADB in 2017 estimates the infrastructure investment needs of South Asia at more than $5 trillion between 2016 and 2030, which amounts to 7.6% of the sub-region's projected GDP. This highlights the need for a collective effort between governments of the region, the private sector, and donors to collaboratively and systematically address this infrastructure shortfall. Australia's focus is therefore on supporting countries in the region to prepare high-quality investment-ready projects and improve policy frameworks to attract private capital. We continue to play a key role in negotiating global rules and standards for infrastructure investments. In our foreign policy white paper, we have been clear on the principles that will guide the types of infrastructure we will support, including in South Asia. We will support investments that are transparent and non-discrimination and promote fair and open competition. Investments that uphold robust standards, including social and environmental safeguards. Those that meet genuine needs, those that avoid unsustainable debt burdens, and also those that support regional economic growth. The second key obstacle, and the focus of this session, is a lack of participation opportunity for women, especially low-income women traders, to benefit from infrastructure growth and therefore contribute to interregional trade and economic growth. It is to our mutual detriment that this second barrier is less recognised than the infrastructure investment requirements, but is just as necessary to ensuring that women, as well as men, have the opportunity to benefit from new market openings and trade opportunities that new infrastructure creates. The Australian Government believes that gender-based inequality in business and trade has an overall dampening effect on productivity and growth, with significant cost to the economy. Gender inequality can and does detrimentally impact on a country's competitiveness and capacity to increase business opportunities. In fact, this has led the World Bank to conclude that gender equality is smart economics. It enhances economic efficiency and improves sustainable development outcomes. It is estimated that limits on women's participation in the workforce across the Asia-Pacific region costs the regional economy an estimated $89 billion every year. And in South Asia, the level of women's exclusion from the workforce is particularly high, where women currently comprise 49% of the population, but only 36% of the workforce. This, coupled with the fact that the majority of vulnerable workers in South Asia, more than 80%, are women, means that just as with infrastructure investment, we have a long way to go, but that together we can work collaboratively to overcome these challenges. Of note, Australian Aid for Trade, aid which is designed specifically to assist the private sector, and governments of developing countries to build their capacity to participate and benefit from trade has been raised to 20% of the overall development budget, or Australian dollars 800 million. Australia has allocated some of these funds to support the World Bank integrate gender responsiveness in major infrastructure projects, trade facilitation and logistics that encourage women as well as men to benefit from trade. I'm pleased to have this all-female panel discuss in more detail the benefits of gender inclusion through Australia-funded South Asia Regional Trade Facilitation Program. Finally, I want to recognise the vital role that the private sector in South Asia plays in both infrastructure and the gender equality space. The private sector is a key driver of economic growth. So if women are to participate in generating business opportunities that will accelerate growth and reap the financial and economic benefits, then the private sector in South Asia must play a leading role. This is why these leading firms, an increasing number of multinationals, including some in Australia and South Asia, do proactively include gender-responsive policies in their workplaces, not just at their headquarters, but along their entire supply chains. This is simply good business, to draw on the perspectives of women to deliver more multidimensional approaches to problems and that drive innovation and better policy. I will leave it to the distinguished panel to elaborate on their experiences in gender-responsive trade and logistical challenge that women entrepreneurs face. At that point, thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Mr. Peter Butt, for your wonderful opening remarks before this fantastic session that we're going to have. Overcome that. How have they overcome that? So I would now introduce our moderator, Ms. Mandakini Kaul, Senior Regional Cooperation Specialist, World Bank. I think they all deserve a big round of applause, first of all. And our panelist, Ms. Salima Ahmed, President and founder of Bangladesh Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Vice President of Nitol Niloy Group. Ms. Mariam Shakila, CEO, Simdi Group Maldives. Ms. Ayanti Gurusinghe, Director, Kapos Consultant, and Ms. Dashma Karunaratne, Chairperson, Women in Logistics and Transport, Sri Lanka. So I would like to request our dear moderator to now kindly take over the session.
Thank you very much, Sadiq. Good afternoon and welcome to this very important session. This is a session that's jointly organized by the World Bank Group and Australia's Department for Foreign Affairs and Trade, and we worked very closely with the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry on putting it together. Let me start by saying that the genesis for this session really was about logistics and infrastructure and connectivity. And as we started thinking about it, what we really started to look at and what we've been working on is how do you bring women into these areas. And of course, as we did further research, we discovered that logistics and trade facilitation is something that we have a lot of dynamic ladies who are already involved in. So really the objective of this session is to take a topic that is gender blind. It's about logistics, and to then bring in people who have worked on it and who just happen to be ladies, who happen to be women. So I just want to remind everyone, this is not a women's session or a women's topic, but this is really about logistics, it's about infrastructure, it's about connectivity, and it's about how you bring gender and women into it. Ambassador Butt, of course, has made my task much easier by talking about, he's given you statistics, he's given you a lot of information, and I think a couple of things that he said were that gender or inclusion is good economics and it makes business sense. And we've been doing a lot of work on this, and I'd like to quote one study from UN Women which says that simply by excluding women from trade, the Asia-Pacific region loses about $8 billion annually. Now you may question these numbers as one always does, but I think it gives you a magnitude of the sense that we're talking about. Inclusion makes sense, gender inclusion makes sense, and we're talking about these issues today with our distinguished panel.
Let me turn now first to Salima, who is not only the founder of the Bangladesh Women's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, but has also led to two policies for women entrepreneurs being introduced in the Bangladesh Parliament, and has really led to some legislation. And so the first question that I will put to the panel, starting with Salima, is about why they think this issue is important. Why is infrastructure important? Why is connectivity important? Why is logistics important? And what are the challenges that men and women, but specifically women, face in this area? Thank you.
Thank you, Mandakini. Good afternoon to all of you. Let me first thank World Bank and DFID for giving me an opportunity to be here. And of course, to our President, SAARC Chamber, who always has encouraged the women to be included into the SAARC Chamber vibrant activities. I was just thinking, sitting here and looking at the audience, and yesterday when we had, except the FNCCI chair who was a woman, all the panelists was men. And this room was full of men, and only few women were there. But we never left the room thinking that all the men are in the panel. But here, I would like to congratulate and also thank the men who are participating, but also to the women by supporting women, not making this room empty, because most of the participants are not participating here today. So this actually gives us that how we are seen. Bangladesh, let me just talk a little about Bangladesh. Bangladesh is one of the 8th largest country compared to population in the world, and Bangladesh is growing. Our GDP is constant, and one of the reasons is, of course, the garments export and also the remittance. But Bangladesh is moving towards from the LDC to middle income countries. And for that, women entrepreneurship or economic empowerment for women is important, because 50% population of Bangladesh is or are women. So for that, if this 50% doesn't participate, then Bangladesh can never be or can go beyond LDCs. So women entrepreneurs are coming, women entrepreneurships are growing, and Bangladesh government, with the lobbying of Bangladesh Women's Chamber, has given 2 policies. One is no collateral with low rate of interest from the bank, and also in the budget there is an allocation of $12 billion for developing and supporting capacity building of women entrepreneurs. But one of the things which we have seen, that logistics, infrastructure and connectivity is always a hindrance, not only for Bangladeshi, I think for SAARC women entrepreneurs. Me as a mentor of FUN, the Federation of Women Entrepreneurs Association of Nepal, the Sri Lanka Women Chamber, the Pakistan Women Chamber, I'm working closely with this organization. I thank the past President Chaya to be here to support me and our group. So when we would like to see more connectivity, one of the things I'd like to say about the visa issues. A Bangladeshi woman entrepreneurs who would like to go to India quickly, getting a business visa is not easy. Going to Pakistan is another problem, whether if she gets a visa, then whether she will be allowed to have or will have face question from the US Embassy that why you have been to Pakistan. When I had the Afghanistan visa long back to support the Afghan businesswomen in 2005, I remember I was asked by the immigration officer in Washington that why I have been to Afghanistan. So you see, no one thinks that these are the SAARC countries. The mobility should be there. From Germany to Denmark or to France, no one asks why you have been to Germany or France. So for the connectivity purpose, of course the visa counts. But one of the things is the infrastructure. You know, to go to Chittagong port, the the infrastructure of Bangladesh is one of the lowest in the world, and to go to Chittagong port it takes about 8 to 10 hours or more than that, but being into the customs, clearing the goods, sometimes take 8 to 10 days. So for a small entrepreneur being men and for women, sometimes it's so difficult. You know, we from the bus, when you go from Dhaka to Benapol border, it takes 8 to 10 hours. But we are hoping that Podda Bridge will be, when it will finish, things will be different. So for the trade integration challenges, one of the things which we said about the infrastructure, and for the infrastructure, as I said, you know, it's not only the Chittagong port, but Bangladesh has so much traffic that connectivity from home to your workplace, home to your producer, home to your marketplace is another challenges. In the World Bank's Doing Business report in 2018, released in November 2017, showed that Bangladesh ranked 177th among 190 economies. So complexity and high cost of trade procedures is one of the challenges, limited access to information and lack of warehouse and distribution facilities. When you would like to agro producer in Bangladesh, in agri economy now, more women are into the agro field because the men are going abroad or in the Middle East countries. So it is the women who are actually producing. But when they want to have a process about that, there is no process or the storage, cold storage nearby. So this is another infrastructure or logistics problem the agro women entrepreneur face, a high damage cost and poorly, and also, as I was talking about the custom officials, you know, when it is delayed, because of the custom officials, you have to pay damage cost. So ultimately it's not my problem, or I was not informed, but I have to bear the cost and the bureaucracy and the red tape. Non-tariff barriers is another problem. But the gender integration challenges, I'd like to say, you know, I worked with the project with the Myanmar and also with the Kolkata women entrepreneurs and also the Bangladesh in the cross-border trade. And I went to the Benapol border, I went to the Petropol border, and there is no toilet for women. Yesterday also, and the High Commissioner promised me, the Indian High Commissioner, the toilet will be built. The Bangladesh, you know, customs head, they also said. But yesterday I called my office to find out in the Benapol border whether that toilet has been, I'm talking about last 4 or 5 years I did that project. Still that toilet is not there. Can you imagine a woman who is taking a night bus or a 10 hours bus, hopping into that custom area, not having a toilet for women? It's not possible. So increasing the number ultimately decreases. So this is a huge challenge on the infrastructure. But yeah, so I'll just limit another thing. For the Myanmar women entrepreneur, they said, you know, I want to buy from the, you know, from the border in the informal trade. Because doing the LCs and all these are so cumbersome that I don't want to go to that thing. So challenges, access to finance, access to market are there. Of course, the capacity building, but more, I think, mindset and the capacity of the custom officials and the logistics, which hindrances the connectivity of men and more women entrepreneurs to export and import in our region. Thank you, Selima.
You made some excellent points, and it's really important to remember, like you said, that it could be a larger infrastructure or logistics problem, but it can sometimes be very small as a basic facility that's not available for women or safe travel. So really important to think of both of these issues as we look at these issues. I would now like to turn to Tashma, who is, among other distinguished things, she is the chairperson of the Women in Logistics and Transport chapter of Sri Lanka. And this came as a surprise to me, at least, because I didn't know that there was a body that dealt with logistics and transport, and she is chairing this in Sri Lanka. So look forward to your views and opinions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandakini.
Let's look at the big picture here. Yes, we face challenges day in, day out. But businesses today emphasize on optimizing productivity. They look at reaching full potential and tap into every last resource. However, a recent report that was released by IFC confirmed that the global economy is underutilizing a staggering 48.4% of its productive potential. The women. Empowering women is good economics. It's not just a moral imperative. And in my opinion, and as the research says, it is very clear. I have found that companies and economies can make greater gains when they employ a representative proportion of women. Mercer went a step further ahead and found that gender equity worldwide can result in a $12 trillion increase in global domestic product, global gross domestic product. Women empowerment is the game changer for these economies to really unleash its potential. That's my view on this, Mandakini. Let's look at the challenges and how we can overcome and share some success stories later on. Thank you, Rashma.
Let me now turn to Dr. Mariam Shakila. It's a bit difficult to introduce her because she has such an interesting and distinguished CV. But let me pick up on two things. One is that she's the CEO of the SIMDI group, which is one of the oldest groups of business groups in Maldives. And she was responsible for one of the first 5-star luxury hotels to be set up there. So we have a lot to be grateful to her for that. But also she has held cabinet minister positions in the government, including for health, family, gender and human rights. Therefore, I would like to turn to Shakila for sharing her initial thoughts about this particular issue and some of the challenges we face. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mandaki. I would like to thank SAARC Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity extended to me and also to take part in this panel. Now, everybody associates Maldives with luxury. Everybody associates Maldives with beauty. Nobody considers the kind of challenges that we face, the geographical limitations that actually requires the kind of proper infrastructure and also the kind of logistics that is needed in order for us to move forward. World organizations, World Bank, etc., has also taken us away from the least development status based on distorted data, considering only on our GDP, which is the region's highest. However, they have not considered the unit cost of service delivery for us to achieve that. So ultimately, the disposable income that is left is the poorest, very little. We are also an island nation faced with lots of challenges that a lot of people over here with landlocked countries would fail to understand. Our islands, they produce goods, but when it comes to transport, it is extremely difficult for us to transport them because the way that you use roads, we can't use. Our highways are the seas, which can become so precarious, so dangerous, that some days it is impossible for us to even travel to a distance of 5 miles. So these are the kind of challenges that we face. And also, you mentioned that I have been in the cabinet. Yes, I have been in the cabinet. I've also fought for the logistics that is gender responsive. Sadly, not only in the Maldives, but then in all the different countries, we do not actually look at it with the gender lens, sadly. All the panels that discuss these kind of issues exclude us women from taking part in that, especially when we are talking of infrastructure and transport. They think that is beyond the understanding of women. I know it's the cultural socialization process that has brought us to that, but sadly, that's a reality that excludes us from that table where we could actually contribute and then also give gender-sensitive responses to that in order for you to develop the right kind of transport for us to move forward. I'm not blaming the men, but I'm not blaming the men, but then sometimes they do not even realize, they do not even realize that they are actually excluding us from these sessions. I will take one example. One of the sessions that we had, the first session that we had yesterday, was talking of unleashing South Asian economies. No woman was there. How do you unleash our economies? By excluding 50% of our population, who could actually bring up a completely, totally different view to the discussion, to the table. Our biological orientation, our biological reality is such that our thinking processes are different, but not inferior. Our thinking process actually take a different path, more relationship oriented. Perhaps it is then again taken as a negative point, very feminine. Sadly, those feminine attitudes, those feminine views are extremely important for us to move forward. When we look at the region, and then why we would say, why we need, for example, the kind of infrastructure, the logistics and the connectivity. That is to increase women's economic opportunities, provide appropriate measures. Looking at Maldives again, I would say that Maldives is also supposedly the most emancipated in terms of women's development, according to several reports, World Bank reports, etc. We do not lack institutional infrastructure, we do not lack the logistical, the legal framework. However, what is the challenge? To develop that kind of infrastructure, mental block, mindsets, implementation, lack of implementation. We have all the required infrastructure for us to actually get that, but we don't get that. We are also talking of, when we look at the region as a whole, we are also looking at the infrastructure, not only hard infrastructure, but also soft infrastructure, which when we try to implement, get subjected to, not only in the Maldives, we are talking of everywhere, subjected to corruption, rivalry, vested interests, regional difficulties that we discussed in length yesterday. These are the things that limits us. These are the things that needs to be corrected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So as you can see, this is already a very tasty session. And we've focused primarily on infrastructure so far, though Shakila has brought up some other very important issues. I'll now turn to Ayanti, who is a director at CardPOS Consultants, and they are the official global service partners for Alibaba.com in Sri Lanka. Ayanti is also a consultant with the United Nations International Trade Council as the national consultant for the National Export Strategy in the field of spices, food and beverages, and trade information and promotion. Now, I know Ayanti has a slightly different take on the challenges that are facing women in this area, so I turn to you now. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhuri. First of all, I want to focus on three main areas as challenges that women face. And to start with, I want to say traditionally, when we do programs or projects, we always do skill development for women. We do skill development and then we use the word empowerment of women. But actually, what we need to understand is women are empowered to a certain extent because she's the mother of the house and she somehow knows how to handle her territory. So one of the main concerns or the issues that I see for women is access to finance. See, for a woman, even though sometimes she's very skilled and she knows how to manage, but still access to finance is a barrier. All the pennies in the house first goes for the main investment or a man's career, the family business led by the man, and even to take a loan, she's unable because maybe the property is already mortgaged for family activities. So access to finance is very difficult, and there are only very few programs that leads or give leverage for women to access finance. Even if there are programs, now in Sri Lanka there are programs that support women, but still they are very small amounts that she can only start a boutique or she can only start a little business. But we are not talking for women to remain there. We want women to take leadership. We are looking at women taking a greater role in the business, in logistics, in the great arena. And it's important. One of the main issues is that access to finance. Secondly is, which comes with skill development, is access to market. Now market access, see what happens is again in a male-dominant South Asia, men when they have to go for a exhibition, when they have to go for a trade delegation, they will tell and they move off. But for a woman, market access is also very difficult because she needs to see about the house. Again comes access to finance. Would she have money to go on overseas trip? Would she have finance to finance her ticket? So it always restricts her. I'm also part of the SAARC Women's Chamber. I think Rita is also here. And even in SWEC, what happens is we find it very difficult to gather women into forums, into international forums, to educate, to give them the exposure. Of course, Salima is also in the SWEC. But what happens is because always, back again, it goes in hand to hand, is access to finance, and then it restricts access to market. So even if you have a good product, you get restricted in selling your product. You get restricted of know how well you need to package, how well you need to market, how well you need to speak in doing your marketing. All that gets restricted because her exposure is limited due to her cultural background. And the third point I want to leave with is another challenge, a little different again from technology, because I come from a digital background as well, is access to technology. And for access to technology is also, see, we all use smartphones, yes, but today's world has moved far away from using a smartphone and trading. Things have gone, online platforms, e-commerce platforms have come. There's greater things that have happened. So we are not looking at maybe the ladies in this forum, but we're looking at our ladies back home. The majority of women also have lack to technology. And again, it opens doors into exposure and the knowledge that they would gather in going into this technology going and working. And also when it comes to technology field, another issue is that there are lack of mentors. See, most mentors are, there are very few women, especially in the IT sector, women technology, because I worked on a project and I did this research in retaining women in technology. If you look at another issue is our cultural, South Asian cultural barriers. Not necessarily, sometimes women also don't help women to go into, especially in the IT sector where there's a lot of work, the working hours are a little different, you work onto other country time zones. So for women, research shows at age of 30, 35, especially on the IT sector, they change careers or they don't come back into the IT career. So women again limits her capacity in acquiring greater knowledge, greater challenges in a world that technology has overpowered and carrying us through. So those are some of the issues that I see. Of course, as Salima shared, customs and non-trade barriers are also an issue. But these things are, I think, on a greater deal for men and women it applies. But particularly for women, I think I like to leave with these three major points that restricts her growth into the next level.
Thank you very much. So as we look at gender-responsive logistics and the inclusion of women in trade, you can see that we've come up with a host of challenges, and some of these, which are, for example, trade policy or border restrictions or just infrastructure, those challenges can apply to both men and women. But then as we probe further, we see that there are some issues such as, be it access to finance, maybe it's the lack of mentors, it's mindsets, which a lot of South Asians are talking about. There are a host of issues that actually may be more specific to women than they are to men and women. I will now turn to the second part of our conversation, which is that while we look at all of these challenges, we also have to look at what the way ahead is. Are there success stories that we can leverage? Are there things that we can learn from? And also, are there issues that we need to think further about? Is it e-commerce? Are there ways in which we can aggregate small women traders and allow them to participate in policy making? Where does the private sector come into this? So really looking at now the way ahead and also examples of success that can be leveraged and scaled up. For this, I will start with Dashma, and because I think she has some interesting insights to share with us, and then I will turn to the other panelists. Dashma, over to you.
Thanks. So I represent Women in Logistics and Transport of Sri Lanka. I'm the chairperson. Our parent body is Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. Now, we talk about statistics. Women in logistics is a mere 3% in Sri Lanka. I'm sure the regional numbers are also in that band. So, Chartered Institute of Logistics is a global body. We have presence in 34 countries, members about 33,000, formed in 1990. Women in Logistics was formed because of the diversity or lack of diversity in the industry. So talking about Women in Logistics and Transport Sri Lanka, what we have done is we have built very good networks. One program that I'd like to talk to you about is the Women Empowerment Principles, where we partnered with UN Women's He for She project. We targeted the top 10 corporate leaders of Sri Lanka. They are the leaders not only in logistics and transport, but in actually many industries. So organizations like Unilever, John Keells Holdings, even Sri Lanka Ports Authority. So we targeted 10 CEOs and we said, you are going to be a he for she partner. So we believe that if diversity is to come forward, diversity to happen, the men have to be part of that program. Women cannot do it on their own, and there is no necessity for women to do it on their own. The men have to support. So I also represent the Port of Colombo, South Asia Gateway Terminals. So Port of Colombo is among the top 30 ports in the world. There are only 2 ports in the region that are in the top 30. Sri Lanka, Port of Colombo ranked at 23, and Nhava Sheva, India ranked at 30. Port of Colombo is growing very positively over the years. If you look at the compound annual growth rate, it's about 10%. That is remarkable for the ports industry. Our success is that all 3 terminals, South Asia Gateway Terminals, even the Ports Authority and the China Merchant CICT are very much concerned in diversity. So it is definitely, there is a positive correlation between the productivity of South Asia Gateway Terminals, where I come from, 4th best in terms of productivity among the top 30 ports, even ahead of Jebel Ali. They are very, very committed towards diversity. So I'll just tell you 3 initiatives that the 3 terminals have done. The government-operated Ports Authority. When you say government, the vibes that you get are conservative, not the trendsetter. They recognized 10 ladies, trained them, and made a world-changing, for the first time in South Asia, crane operators. Female crane operators were trained and released, and they have commenced work. And when you say a crane, it is taller than a 4-story building. A crane will carry 60 tons, 80 tons container. Yes, there is a mindset change that needs to be done, not among the men, also among the women, among the mothers, among the teachers, among the university lecturers. You don't need to have the biceps and the triceps to lift a container. You just need to sometimes just handle a joystick, get on a lift, go up on a crane. So these mindset changes have happened, and Sri Lanka Ports Authority is setting the trend. If we look at South Asia Gateway Terminals, we even go to the extent of positioning women differently. So we sponsor the women's rugby team. How isn't that like, it doesn't gel in this part of the region. We sponsor the women's rugby team. The Sri Lanka rugby is very committed. Right now they are in Malaysia, and I'm sure they will win the championship again consecutively. I can see a lot of responses coming from the Australian audience here. So yes, so it's about creating awareness and also positioning women differently. Sometimes
us as parents, we stereotype our daughters. So I don't want to go to that arena, but definitely there are success stories, and it's not coincidental that Port of Colombo is leading the way in terms of productivity, in terms of volume, in terms of growth. We are the 4th fastest growing port among the top 30 ports, and it's no coincidence that all 3 terminals are committed towards women empowerment. Thank you, Dashma. That's excellent. But it does also show that you have to be innovative when we talk about diversity, and it ranges from women crane operators to sponsoring rugby teams, or we should try sponsoring the cricket teams, and then maybe there'll be more of a response here. But excellent examples, and I think we look forward to hearing more at a later stage. Let me now turn to Shakila and ask you also to talk about some of the way forward, some examples that may work, or just what your views are on how we can deal with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandaki. Actually, I think the way forward is for us to develop strategies to include women in all these projects. We need to incorporate gender-specific objectives into whatever project that we design, through whatever agency that we do it. We also need to use gender analysis and sex disaggregated data in order to develop strategies throughout all our projects that we do. I also feel that in order to sustain growth over the long term, our governments need to address the fundamental structural problems, the regulatory inefficiencies, and also the endemic corruption that have blocked greater economic freedom. If they do not correct these problems, they will foster a better life for their citizens and a more peaceful and prosperous world. They will not do that. I also feel that, like, for example, looking at Maldives. Maldives is a country that imports over 90% of everything that we use, from luxury goods to the basic goods. We also, the country, still quite dependent on international aid, international viewpoints. Often what happens is that even when international agencies come to help us, they actually do not look at it with the cultural and also the ground realities within our country. We need to do that. We can't generalize on strategies. Often what happens is that for many projects, what the international community tries to do is try and enforce strategies and successful strategies that was developed somewhere else with their ground reality to be enforced on us. I think these are things that need to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shikila. I think that's another very important point, is about when you're planning a road, when you're building something, you think of inclusion at that point. And this is something that we have done, we're trying to do with our Australian partners. I can give you an example of a waterways project. We spoke about the importance of waterways in the previous session. So in one of the inland waterways project that the World Bank is working on in India and Bangladesh, we are really trying to see how in the project design we can already incorporate aspects of gender inclusion so that women as well as men use those, as opposed to developing something and then saying, oh, but we forgot to include a toilet, or the lights are not there. So really, importance of design and of course mindsets. I'm actually now going to turn to Ayanti and then give Salima the final word. So Ayanti, over to you.
I think we, as we speak, continue to speak like on solutions. I would like to go on to access to technology. And then elaborate a little bit about the e-commerce platforms that are available in our country. Even though I represent onto Alibaba.com, I think except Nepal, their presence is in all the countries. And but there are many e-commerce platforms. But it's time that we take the challenge and enter into these e-commerce platforms, because that gives you the opportunity to access the buyers, especially because of course on Alibaba is the only B2B platform, unlike other B2C platforms where you could, if you have bulk to provide, you go onto these platforms. There are platforms that provided B2C solutions. You could access those, because that gives you access into all the 100 and so many countries that are there in the world. Alibaba provides 290 countries. You could advertise in 16 different languages. So see, what happens is, if you wait to go for a trade show, if you wait to go for international delegation, it hinders. But this will give you the access into marketing your product, the beautiful products that we've done, the saris, to crafts, to anything, into the international arena. And I think I think when the SAARC CCI is working out on a e-commerce platform. So even the SAARC CCI is creating platforms that you could really make use of it. And once your product sells, and once the dollars are in your hand, you have the power. That is where actually, as women, we get power. Then you could manage, you could spend a little extra money and get a maid or somebody to look after your house, to make your husband's food cover, and then you go into the challenge. But you need to make that first step. So there were discussions, I think, when we were also discussing that does e-commerce restrict women into house, or does e-commerce, is it another mechanism to keep women at home? No, it doesn't happen that way. Because you trade at home, because that is your most closest platform to trade. But once the buyers come, the trading happens, you move on. And then you will also see sometimes necessity makes you become it's the mother of creation, innovation. Because once your trade happens, you need the support of logistics. You need the support of shipping. Then you are knowledgeable. You can then get people to work for you, but you move forward. You come into leadership. And that will break some of the barriers. So in today's world, because e-commerce is not a very difficult thing, and it's available in all our countries, that's a solution for you to go in power. We need men. They are our mentors, they are our supporters. We work together, but we work as families. We work as, together as a team, but that takes us forward. One more thing I want to say also onto access to finance is one thing. Actually, it's like a government decision, maybe it's a donor-driven decision. So that limits us. That doesn't give us much opportunity to break those barriers. But what happens is, I think, there are the donors here, there are the bankers here, I'm sure there are the wealthy businessmen here. So you could consider it as a solution. Maybe we do CSR programs, do the corporate social responsibility programs, the donor-driven programs. When we do these programs, just see to women to give, not necessarily you give grants or loans, because they can pay back, but give an opportunity to access to finance at a large loans, corporate loans. Not the little pennies, because that's anyway taken care of in every country. Every country in South Asia, I know this for Sri Lanka, even for India, our countries are supporting. They are giving space for women to grow. So politically, the will is there, and they provide us, but we're looking at the next level. So if we can, whenever there are programs, even in a corporate social responsibility, because there are the women leaders, the men leaders present here, look at the way that you could give women access to the bigger loans, to pay back. But that opportunity is there for the first huge grant. That will change some of the barriers that we're looking at and bring equality between both genders. Thank you.
Thank you, Anandi. That's a very persuasive argument about e-commerce and basically that how you can demand the services once you are doing well, once you have accessed those markets. And we're South Asians, we don't get our husbands to cook. We hire help to cook for them, so that's important to remember. Finally, I know that Salima has slightly differing views on e-commerce, but I'd ask you to now give your final thoughts, both on the way forward and also on e-commerce. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Being the first and being the last is so difficult to connect with the audiences. Logistic and infrastructure is ultimate for the connectivity of the businesses. And for women and also small entrepreneurs, both men and women, the cost of doing business is very important. The large companies can sometimes adjust with their costs reducing their promotion, reducing their advertisement. For small entrepreneurs, it's difficult. And when you don't have this logistic support, when you don't have infrastructure, when your things are delayed, when your things are rotten, when you have perishable goods and it is rotten down, then this small entrepreneur really sometimes get out of the businesses. We also need to see the global value chain. We need to see that how we can put women and also small entrepreneur into that global value chain. We need to actually educate women entrepreneurs. So many women entrepreneurs participate in trade fairs, in international trade fairs, but how many knows about the pro forma invoice? How many knows about the CIF? How do they know about the cost of, like, from Chittagong port to Sri Lanka? How many containers, how many boxes will feed their goods? They don't take that knowledge and that information. So sometimes when they're sitting to the trade fairs and someone is asking to, import, and what will be the cost in the bunches, they just don't know. So these are the, hampers the connectivity because not knowing that. Being an entrepreneur, you want to do business, you want to make profit. But the entrepreneurship process totally hindrances lack of logistics and lack of infrastructure. Because during that process, you need infrastructure, you need logistics. And I just would like to, tell everyone that, within the SAARC, it is high time we need all men and women who are doing the businesses 5-year SAARC visa. It's very, very, very important. When the chamber endorses, when the federation endorses, these are real entrepreneurs. So there should not be any problem of fear that they are, terrorists or they can, damage our country by entering in our country from another SAARC region. If the government, if the nation of each SAARC region doesn't have that confidence with the entrepreneur, then how what about the logistics and connectivity or the infrastructure we talk about? Nothing will progress. So this is high time we need to talk about it. I'd like to end with a story of Jahanara. She was a small entrepreneur from Narai. She used to produce handicrafts with beautiful stitches. She never had a passport. I remember I made her passport and took her to Myanmar to sell her product. And she never sat in a trade fair. She sold all her product. I took her to Thailand. I took her to Vietnam and Cambodia. And she said, what to do here? I said, just look at the bazaar and look at all the product. She said, what I am doing? I said, just look and look, just see. She came back to Dhaka and then she went to her villages and she said, so many things I have seen and I can make that product. We got an opportunity to take her to a trade fair in Bari in Italy. It's a very good trade fair. She participated in the trade fair. All her products are sold. And that was supported by the Women's Chamber. Now she's participating in all the trade fair in the world, and she's now the leader taking other women entrepreneurs. So we need to see and never feel or see that women entrepreneurs can't do anything. They can do, and they are doing it. We need support in logistics, we need support in the infrastructure, we need toilets, we need a healthy environment and safety. Safe travel, safe mobility, and of course, our connectivity will increase, our enterprise will increase, and it is not only for profit making. For a woman entrepreneur of SAARC region, it is to prosperous their country, it is to build a prosperous nation, and it is about gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you. I think after that impassioned statement from there's very little that I can add. We are actually, I think the all women's panel has been extremely efficient and we are ready to open for comments. But before that, Dashma wants to make one small quick point.
Yes. We just now heard how a mentor or a sponsor can really drive the program of female advocacy. So I have a challenge for the heroes and the sheroes out here. I'm a practitioner. Yes, policy is very good, but I'd like to see each one of you mentor to at least 5, maybe 3 ladies, 2 gentlemen. And let's see next time when we meet, what's the progress we have achieved. I would challenge you all to be the change you want to see. Thank you.
Very good. I'll now open this for questions and not comments, and I'd request you to introduce yourselves. And gentlemen, please don't be afraid. Do ask us questions. So please, and we have a gentleman. Please go ahead.
Namaste. My name is Vinay. I'm from Nepal. My question is for no one in particular in the panel, but then everyone, or maybe even if the participants are interested. What should the what can be the key principles or the key roles of young South Asians or the youth in general be in supporting the discourse of long-term inclusive growth? Simple.
Should we take a couple of more questions and then we can? 2 more. Okay. We have someone there, and please go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Durgesh Bakshi from CK Birla Group, India, and I have been a member of Gender Diversity Task Force from my company, from my group, and before that I was also in the Gender Diversity Task Force of Raymond Group, which was a 5-member committee, and I was the only male member in that. So honestly speaking, it was a life-changing experience for me. Thanks to the all eminent panelists of this session. But taking it forward out of my own experiences and out of the things which you people have suggested, there are 3-4 points on which I would like to definitely seek your guidance and opinion. First is, one of the biggest challenges which we face in terms of the meritocracy, or probably a very talented pool from the women entrepreneur or probably women employees, is the time of maternity leave. And this is really a very, very sensitive thing, because in the process we lose very good female resources because we are not sensitive to the fact, and we became a victim of an unconscious bias that this lady is going to be married, this lady is going to be on her family way, then probably we will be losing a resource. So at this particular forum, at the SAARC level, can we really think of being little sensitive on this particular thing? Because you know, South Asia is changing to a newer generation, 25 to 35, and this talent pool will be the key source. Another thing is on the meritocracy part. On the meritocracy thing, without compromising on the meritocracy, can we have a very fair outlook that if there are 2 candidates, 1 female and 1 male, and both are equally competent, then we consciously take a decision to recruit female candidate on board. That was my second point. And final point is about, which India is very sensitive, is about the prevention of harassment during the workplace. So I would like to draw attention of the eminent panelists and do some guidelines on these sensitive questions.
Thank you very much. I think we'll just respond to these, and then if there's time. So excellent set of questions. This is a panel of distinguished women who all have children, so who have all been through maternity leave. So there are some very creative solutions that we can help you with. So let's start with first the youth and South Asia question, which Shakila is going to take, and then everyone else can chip in, then we'll move to the second.
I think the question was, what is the role of youth in bringing up or in developing the kind of infrastructure? When we talk of gender involvement, when we talk of gender parity, we are not excluding youth. Since the forum discussion over here is on gender, so we talked about gender. Of course, the participation of youth, Their viewpoint is extremely important. There has to be an inclusive panel, inclusive team to discuss all these issues. Disability issues are there, youth issues are there, all different issues, all different people with different expertise on all these regions should be there on that list. No one should be excluded from the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakila. So let me just expand on that a little bit. I think there is an effort by various organizations to work with youth, involve them at an early age. So for example, even I understand the SCCI has a youth chamber. Similarly, I think all of us, bilaterals, multilaterals, business houses, we actively reach out to different constituencies to talk about these issues. And I think one of the objectives today as well is to mainstream and to talk about the importance of inclusion, because it makes economic sense, because for the economic growth of all of our countries, these issues are important. So it's really a multi-pronged, diverse approach. And I think we all have to work on this together. I'll now turn to our second question that had been asked, and I'll ask Ayanti to respond to that.
On children and maternity leave and women coming back, I mean, as Mantagini very well said, we are all a panel of mothers who have really picked up onto our careers. But say career, there are certain careers like IT, because it's so fast moving, and then how do you come back? Because by the time you come back, maybe the technology is lost. But actually, it is not so. You know, for a woman, when you go maternity leave, it doesn't make her sick or it doesn't make her redundant. It only gives her energy to go forward, and it only gives every woman she works actually double time her time, you know, and sleeps for very few hours. And those who are passionate with their careers, those who are passionate with, you know, their job, what you do, you will always find time. So it is the responsibility of every woman. I mean, whatever you struggle or you balance your housework, you go on retaining your knowledge. Knowledge, especially in today's world, we have things like internet, we have newspapers, which picks up all the updated events. So you go back and you keep yourself updated. I mean, that's how I think all of us have moved on in our careers.
And also I think on this, it's really up to the employers as well to have policies. Affordable childcare in South Asia, of course, is a big gap. And as a mother of a 5-year-old, that's a big issue for me. We have an extensive informal family support system, but that's not enough. And I think safe, affordable childcare is something that's important. Plus, I think policies, flexible hours, working from home, there are ways in which women can be, you don't lose your mind, basically. So,
my thought process was towards that changing the mindset from the corporate and the society as a whole.
I'm going to give all of you. So I think, I agree. So I think it's introducing the policies and then implementing them. So that's one thing. Now my fellow panelists are very keen to all respond. So Salima, then Shakila, and then finally the lady with the youngest child in the panel. We'll end with her. Please, go ahead.
I'm a bit disappointed. Today's topic about infrastructure, logistic, connectivity. For the last 1.5 days, there were so many panelists, so many things was discussed. No one spoke to a man about paternity leave. So why now? Because we're talking in different aspects. We were not talking the topic as balancing family and our work, right? So let's talk about our own thing. Being a mother at the age of 17, nothing stopped me by educating myself, getting the highest degree and being into the business and also being the chair of Women's Chamber. So whatever the maternity leave has or not doesn't stop us. Doesn't stop us at all. So that is important. And I request all of you, just go with the subject, not be gender sensitized. Don't put out these sort of questions. All right. Now coming back to the, I get it's really agitated. For the youth, I would like to say be gender sensitized. Think men and women, you can do, young women can do everything what you can do. They are intelligent, they are smart, they are knowledgeable, and support each other in that way. The way we support the men. So we never see men as a man, we see them as a colleague. So in this connectivity and the logistics, we also need men to give us logistics support as a human being. I think that is important. Because if we have the custom officials, I remember when I was first in 1980, I was so young, I was going to participate in a trade fair and my passport was business and stopped me that why business, why you are traveling alone. So these are the things we faced, right? So we need to know our ability and answer promptly. So the infrastructure is, as I said, important, but each nation and the SAARC Chamber of Commerce now should work more on the logistics aspects for the small entrepreneur and also for the woman entrepreneur to be gender sensitized. I'd like to say always gender sensitized. I don't want to use that only woman. But in a panel of women, don't talk only about women. You talk about business person. We are business person, we are here because we know businesses. We know how to promote entrepreneurship. We are not here only as a woman. So e-commerce is something which I'd like to end on because many are talking about e-commerce, which is very, very important. But those who are in e-commerce, I'd like to request them also to be into the marketplace, not to be confined only into your computer, because then you don't know your market competitors. Then you don't know the bribery, the corruption things which is happening in SAARC region, because that is also important to know. You need to know your customers personally. When you know your customers personally, instead of online, you understand many things. So these are also important. So whoever doing home-based businesses or mainstream business, they also need to change their businesses or put another line of businesses on e-commerce, and those who are only on e-commerce, they also should come into the mainstream businesses. I think that is important, and that will increase more and more connectivity for men and women businesses. Thank you very much.
Most of what I had to say was said by Mandaki and also by you, Ashma. But what I want to say is, bringing the issue of maternal leave, you are immediately stereotyping. Except for a very short period, maternal leave, the mother need not be there 24 hours a day. There are programs where successfully fathers have taken that role and the women go out depending on who is earning more. So stop stereotyping. Stop stereotyping like this. Successfully fathers are doing that. I know sometimes mother-in-laws do not like it. Who cares as long as the result is good for the mother-in-law and for the whole family. One last point that I want to make is, we're talking of technology, access to technology and how it would help. What I'm going to say is that access to technology alone will not work. It has to be combined, integrated into a lot of other things like the infrastructure, transport, and all sorts of other issues, or other components in order for us to be successful. We are discussing this subject also because we wanted to bring prosperity, economic prosperity and growth to our region. Why not SAARC Chamber of Commerce develop a platform to create that logistics, like for example for a country like Maldives or for a country like Bhutan, where we can access information with the press of one button. We do not have to run around looking for the documents or to find how to fill the documents, etc. They can be implemented by SAARC, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shikhi. Mashma, the final word rests with you. I think I've taken on what Salima said. So could you close with something on logistics and not on maternity? And so the last word rests with you. We can't take more questions, so please.
So for the corporates who are out there, the top corporates, if you really want the talented ladies to remain or to come back, there are always many methods of bringing them back. Women in Logistics partnered with Maersk, the world's largest shipping line, with a program called Back to Work, where you would get women to log in online, work flexi hours. You give them opportunity to come back to the industry or come back to the corporate world. So having said that, I think it's important for us women also not to highlight the fact that we have kids, we have meals to cook for our husbands. I think it's important that we position ourselves as business leaders. Yes, we all have those things in the background, but I think positioning ourselves in the mindsets of people is important. I have a 6-month-old baby at home, but I'm here because I'm committed. Even about maternity leave, when you do give your staff your maternity leave, you will find loyal employees who will come back to the organization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dashma. So we will now close the session. I would first like to thank this extremely dynamic panel of women entrepreneurs. And you can see this has been very much a group effort. We have, in a sense, discussed every question, and the panel has really come together, which also shows the power of women working together. I hope this session brings home one important message. Inclusion, gender-sensitive issues. Inclusion is good economics, it's good business, and as you go back to your businesses, to your work, please remember, without including the entire workforce, the entire population, you cannot experience the growth and development that you would with everybody included. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the wonderful panelists. It has definitely been an efficient and a fantastic session. A huge thank you to them all, and you know, as we discussed, thank you for ending on a half-full note. Definitely, there's so much to be done when it comes to connectivity in South Asia in order to unleash its prosperity. And I think I won't be wrong in saying that with women in the areas of logistics and connectivity, we can definitely unleash our prosperity faster and by leaps and bounds. So thank you so much to this wonderful panelists that we have, and I would now like to invite on stage Ms. Hina Saeed, the Secretary General of SAARC CCI, to kindly present token of appreciation to these wonderful moderator and panelists, to Ms. Mandakini Kaul, to our panelists Ms. Salima Ahmed, to Ms. Mariam Shakila, to Ms. Ayanti Gurusinghe, to Ms. Dashma Karunarande. And I'd also like to invite His Excellency Mr. Peter Butt to kindly come and join these ladies on stage and to receive your token of appreciation for your opening remarks in this fantastic session. I'd also like to make a small announcement that the B2B meetings are happening in Kirtipur along with the SAARC Bazaar that's happening at the garden area. So while you have your lunch, you can go have a look at all the wonderful creations from all these different artisans who have brought in their products from all the SAARC nations. And also we're going to have another wonderful, powerful session called Women Empowering South Asia right after the lunch break. So to all the ladies, I'm sure you'll be here, but also to all the gentlemen to do join us after the lunch break.